What you're about to watch is a 3-hour long discussion between myself, Rob Young, the survivor and victim of a school shooting in 1989, Stephen Willeford, who stopped the Sutherland Springs church shooting, and Aaron Suozzo, who spent a career in law enforcement, have a conversation and answer questions from you, the public, that I posed on my social media about how to prevent these tragedies going forward. We recorded this just 2 days before the events of September 10th and Charlie Kirk's assassination. And I want to make something extremely clear. We are going to hold true that Charlie Kirk was doing the right thing, that he was opening the microphone, allowing anybody and everybody to come and speak and debate him that may have disagreed with him. And you may have agreed with everything he said. You may have disagreed with everything that he said. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem are those of you who are celebrating and justifying his death. You are the problem. You're not welcome to the discussion anymore. You killed the man that welcomed you. I don't believe the rest of us will be. You're the reason we have to arm ourselves. We have to train ourselves, and we have to carry a firearm for defense. The left is always calling for gun control, while the right is, typically not for that. And I think that's because there's two different mindsets at place. The conservative mindset is we own firearms for defense. The left, that keeps being proven to us time and time again, is you guys keep using them for offense. Anyway, take a listen. Stephen, Aaron, and Rob, and myself are eager to have this conversation about saving and preserving the youth of our nation, the children, and the future of this nation. And we want to do that peacefully. But let us not forget, we shall make no peace with evil. God bless, and may God help us. Welcome back, everybody. Clint here today. Excited to be joined by a couple of gentlemen that I have been honored to have on the channel now, and I have admired for quite some time. One of which, if you've been following me since I was at Classic Firearms, you should be aware of who Stephen Willeford is, as I had the opportunity to interview him on the CF podcast, and I've welcomed him today to our roundtable. And of course, Stephen stopped a mass murder, a mass killing that was happening in a church. So it'll be really cool to get kind of his experience and answer some of these questions that you, some of the audience, have submitted. Additionally, I'm going to be welcoming also Rob James Young, who survived one of these situations. And so we have someone who has survived one of these horrific events, and then we also have somebody who has stopped one of these events. So let's go ahead and welcome Rob and Stephen now. So appreciate you guys, joining me and ultimately joining my audience to talk about and answer some of their questions and talk about how we can kind of prevent some of these horrific events from taking place in the future. As we just saw what happened in Minnesota, it's terrible. And even though the mayor doesn't want us really saying anything about thoughts and prayers, we have all been offering our thoughts and prayers. But first thing I want to do before we kind of move into some of the questions that have been submitted, and some of the ones that I've just been asked throughout my career also, is I just want to kind of get an introduction from one of you. And Rob, since you're kind of right next to me on the screen, or at least how it's being presented, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off, man.
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me, Clint. I've watched you for a long time. I appreciate, everything you do for us and the content that you've been putting out for years now. But again, my name is Rob Young. I have about 20 years of law enforcement experience under my belt. I was medically retired in 2023 due to a back and neck injury, cumulative injury. But my story really begins in 1989. I was a first grader at Cleveland Elementary School in Stockton, California. And for those of us who, know our histories, Cleveland Elementary was ground zero for, mass school shootings and what we know of mass school shootings here in America. For a long time, since the 1700s, we've had attacks on school age kids, but the Cleveland Elementary School shooting was unprecedented, and the fact that it was an intruder who entered our campus with an AK-47 and a 9mm pistol. He opened fire on the kids as they played at recess. He shot 29 kids, killed 5, and then killed himself as law enforcement got on scene. Well, I was one of the 29. I was hit twice. I had a AK-47 round travel through my right foot. Still have one in my chest to this day. I'm very lucky to have survived. That shooting sparked modern day gun control here in California and across our country, and it's still talked about in legislative hearings to this day. It was kind of a groundbreaking case. 2013, working as a cop in the Bay Area, I responded to a gunman in a neighborhood. Guy was walking through a neighborhood with a machete and a 45, and I just happened to be Johnny on the spot and was one of 6 officers who stopped that gunman and killed him. So my story kind of came full circle.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Wow, that's incredible. And so, I mean, you said first grade. How old were you in first grade?
I was 6.5 years old.
So 6.5 years old, 7.62 by 39, one in the foot and one in the chest.
Yeah. So thankfully, the round that hit me in my foot, it swept my feet up from under me, and I hit the pavement. And then the round that hit me in my chest, it hit the pavement in front of me, kind of broke apart, and a large piece is in my chest.
And it's still there today?
Still there.
Wow, that's incredible, man. Well, thank God you're still here with us, and we're able to take some of your experience and incorporate that into today's discussion, which, I'm sure both of you know too. I've talked to both of you beforehand because I want this to be something really an open dialogue, and I want the comment section to light up of whether you're, and this is exactly what I put out there on social when I had these questions submitted, whether you're pro-gun, anti-gun, somewhere in the middle, feel free to ask us these questions, these hard questions. And, outside of personal experiences, I don't expect guys like us to get, too aggressive and emotionally overwhelmed in our responses and things like that, because at the end of the day, we want to have this dialogue and welcome people not only to our community, but just to the discussion. Because as we see a lot, emotion gets way too involved, and we see a lot of bickering and arguing and fighting and a lot of nonsense being said back and forth on both sides. So it's like, okay, if I can use my channel to help open up this dialogue a little bit, great. So if you are pro-gun and you've got anti-gun family or friends that you'd like to maybe send this discussion to, send this video to, I encourage you to do so. And if you haven't, and I'm actually going to send out the invite to anybody that would like to actually have this conversation with us 3 or anybody else that I might be welcoming to the channel, like my friend Aaron Suozzo might be hopping on here in a little bit too, to offer some of his experience also in law enforcement. But anybody that might just be completely anti-gun, thinks firearms are the worst thing ever, and you want to have this discussion, I invite you to submit your questions, your comments, and of course, perhaps maybe even have you on the channel. But with that being said, Stephen, let's hear about you, man.
So I grew up in the coolest little bitty small town in this nation. Sutherland Springs, Texas is under 600 for total population. So it's Mayberry, USA. We all had our Aunt B and Opie and the whole bunch, my great grandfather, and I had my great grandparents until I was in my mid-20s. So when I talk about him, I knew him well. And when I was a little bitty boy, he would pick me up and hold me up, and I'd grab the bell to the church there in Sutherland Springs, and he would pull me up and down to ring the bell to bring people to worship in Sutherland Springs when I was so small. I did not attend that church. I attended another church, but they were my people. They were the people that I cared about greatly. I knew almost everybody that was in the church. And on November 5th, 2017, madman came in and started shooting through the walls and the windows of a church that was over 100 years old, murdering people. And he entered into the doors and started going from pew to pew, murdering people. My daughter made me aware of what was going on, and I opened my safe. I grabbed an AR-15, a magazine, and I just popped that box open, and it was a 100-round loose ammo, and I grabbed a handful of it and ran to the door, sticking rounds in the magazine as I ran. And I ran across the street and engaged a shooter that had on Class 3 body armor, ballistic bulletproof helmet. And he shot at me. I ran behind a truck for cover. He hit the truck in front of me. He shattered the windshield of the car behind me, hit the house behind me. I put 6 out of 6 rounds on him. And 3 of those 6 were stopped by the body armor. But in the end, I won and he lost.
Yeah, incredible, man. I remember when you and I had this discussion on that podcast, I mentioned the CF podcast with Classic Firearms, that you had just, not long before that, had just taken a course about how to navigate targets or threats that might be wearing body armor. Is that correct?
Well, so I used to shoot on a pistol team, a church pistol team. We called ourselves the Sinners. And one of our sinners was a former Army Ranger and a San Antonio police officer. And in between competition, we like to stay sharp and stuff. And it wasn't national competition or something big. It was local competition. And in between competition, we would practice what he taught me to. And for 3 weeks straight, he taught me how to shoot around body armor.
Wow.
And why would a plumber need to know how to shoot around body armor? It was golfing, but for men.
Yeah.
And I was a firearms instructor. I was a competitive shooter. I instructed a youth shooting league, and one of my youth shooters went on to set women's collegiate national record with a pistol.
Wow.
So we shot a lot, and like I say, golfing, but for men. And we really enjoyed the whole shooting sports. And
yeah,
when it hits the fan, you would hope that you would do the right thing. I mean, you have the tools, you have the training. Colonel Grossman, in one of his books, stated that a golf course is a willful misuse of a perfectly good rifle range.
Right.
He says that any hobby you should have some sort of use. Hitting a golf ball around on a golf range is not as useful. It's not going to help you in a bad situation.
I mean, hand-eye coordination could help, there's a little bit of that, right? It's kind of like the Mr. Miyagi, Kung Fu is everywhere. It just depends on how you look at it,
Yeah. Wax on, wax off.
That's right. All right. Well, again, just an incredible, just sequence of events that led you to where you ultimately were and were able to stop evil at the end of the day. So, again, like I mentioned before, just incredible what you did. And thank you. Thank you for saving lives. So let's go ahead and get into a little bit more background. For instance, we're going to go ahead and roll into the personal experience and meaning when it comes to firearms, things like that. So what was the moment in your life that most shaped your view of firearms? Not as a policy issue, but as something deeply personal. Now, obviously, we can talk about when you were 6, Rob, I think that might be there, but obviously if you want to add more to that, feel free.
Yeah.
And then Stephen, this happened in 2017, your situation, and but I'm sure you were obviously involved with firearms even long before that, I'm sure. And Stephen, I'll go ahead and just start with you.
So again, I was a competitive shooter. I ran a youth shooting league and competition, and which, by the way, all of our shooters went on to win 5 junior national championships for the state of Texas when they were juniors. Those were my kids that did that 5 years in a row. Most of my adult life, I've enjoyed firearms, shooting and stuff. And there was a point in my life where I took a lieutenant colonel chaplain from the Air Force out shooting. And he said, you're pretty good. you should start competing. And I said, I'm not good enough to compete. And he said, if you never compete, you never will be good enough. And that started my competition and started some of the training. I took some training for self-defense, and I took enough classes. I started giving classes for self-defense. People would ask me in my class, how do you know that you would step up and do the right thing if anything ever happened? And my response was always, you don't know until it happens. Mm-hmm. However, just like in Taekwondo or any martial arts, when you move from one belt to the next belt, you demonstrate moves on the floor to be able to get to the next belt. And what you're doing is you're training your subconscious mind to do the correct thing when something happens. If somebody throws a punch at you and you have to think, I have to block it this way, the punch already connects before you think about it. So you have to train your subconscious to do what it does. And that's what training does, is it starts training your mind. Yeah. And in that sort of situation, if you have to think about it, it's too late. And if you don't train your mind and you're in a high stress situation, you'll do exactly what you trained it to do, and that's nothing.
Yeah.
So that's where my, training for what, and I thought it was all just training. I didn't think that anything would ever happen that would involve me running across the street with a gun.
Barefoot. Yeah. And barefoot, right?
And barefoot. Yes, I did. Yeah. People say, I can't believe you didn't put shoes on. And I tell them, they call me the barefoot defender now.
Yeah, I totally get it. In that moment, you got to pick up and do what you got to do. Rob, for you, after, when you were 6, and how long was your recovery after that?
I was in the hospital for about 3.5 days, and I was home for about a month before I returned to school.
Wow.
And, I was pretty fortunate. The bullet that went through my foot, it didn't hit a bone. And if this is my foot, the bullet entered here, exited here. And they think because I was so young that the energy that the round expelled pushed my bones out of the way, and my bones were soft enough to where, it didn't hit a bone. If it would have hit a bone, it would probably taken my foot off.
Jeez.
I was so lucky. And again, the round that hit me in my chest, it kind of fishtailed around arteries and, missed my heart, missed my lungs. Just the hand of God was over me. For sure. But as far as, getting into shooting and really starting to pay attention, I didn't grow up around guns. I didn't grow up around, we didn't have guns in the home other than, my brothers were getting in trouble and probably had a pistol or something, but I maybe had shot a firearm once or twice growing up before I joined the police academy. And in 2002, I joined the police academy and put myself through, and I really started paying attention because obviously now, I'm having to carry a firearm, having to qualify. I'm recognizing the gun as a tool, and I wanted to be good at that, right? Because my life depended on it. My partners depended on it. And so I really started paying attention and shot very well, actually, throughout the year. And the last day, it was on Father's Day in 2003. My grandfather was a World War II vet, passed away. And I had my firearms test that day. And one of my instructors, mentor, came up to me, put his arm around me, knew, that my grandfather had passed away that day. And my papa was my hero. Said, do it for Papa. And not only did I ace my test, I shot against everybody in my class in a competition and beat everybody. It was an instant elimination. I probably shot against 34, 35 people.
Wow.
And won every round. And then went up against my instructors and outshot every one of my instructors, all but one. And it was literally 6 metal poppers, at 25 yards, and we're shooting Glock 19s, had 2 magazines with 6 rounds each. So if you missed a shot, you had to reload and shoot again, right? And it was like, 5 poppers go down. We both missed the 6th one. It was the only one that I missed that day. We both dropped our mag. He loaded, I loaded, dropped a slide. He fired, I fired. His went down, mine went down. He beat me by like half a second. Well, yeah. So they presented me with this big trophy and all this. And it was an eye opener for me. I go, man, there's something to this. I never did martial arts or anything like that. I mean, I would fight and, we did boxing a little bit growing up, but to me, it became a martial art for me. And I fell in love with the sport, right? And the dynamics of shooting. And that's when I really started calling myself a shooter. And then, working in law enforcement, I start paying attention to politics a little bit more, started hearing about school shootings and mass shootings, and it hit close to home for me. And I'm always the type, I want to be involved. Like when 9/11 happened, I wanted to be in New York. I wanted to be there helping at ground zero. And every time a school shooting would happen, I wanted to be there to help. Obviously, I can't, and I started hearing a lot of like politicians calling for more gun control. And I'm going, I never blamed the gun for what happened to me, right? And they're citing the Cleveland school shooting as their basis for argument. And I'm going, wait a second, I survived that, and the wheels started turning in my head. And it wasn't until well into my career, Sandy Hook happened, and an email was sent to GOA on my behalf from a friend of mine. And because I was telling him that I wanted to be involved. And the email was intercepted by Larry Pratt, and Larry ended up calling me the next day and was like, man, I've heard some of your testimony. I've seen you on the news. I just didn't know your stance on the Second Amendment. How can I help you? And I said, well, that's the question I have for you. How can I help you? And that's how I really got involved in the whole Second Amendment fight, and was introduced to, Sam Paredes over at Gun Owners of California. And long story short, they ended up flying me out to Washington, D.C., and I testified in front of there, and introduced a gun bill there, and testified in Sacramento several times, and just became very passionate about the Second Amendment. And, feel very fortunate to be on the fight. And like we talked about in the beginning is, having those discussions, having the hard discussions, being willing to have those hard discussions with people who have, a fear or a misconception of what they think needs to happen, really. Right.
Yeah. And, we, like you said, there's this, I think that's the biggest thing is fear and misconceptions. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to fix a little bit today is, you fear what you don't know. And there's a lot of ignorance out there with firearms. You and I, all of us here know, especially politicians, they will say what they think they know, and maybe sometimes they are intentionally trying to mislead people. But for instance, we saw it with this last incident that took place, this last tragedy that took place in Minneapolis. I heard so many people talking about this being full auto, talking about, even semi-auto, meaning multiple rounds per trigger pull, which of course we know that's incorrect here. And for anybody that's watching, semi-auto, which is a majority, I can't give an actual statistic, but a majority of firearms today that you're going to see and most popular are semi-automatic, including the AR-15, including just about any Glock pistol outside of like the Glock 18, which is full auto. Semi-auto means for every one function of the trigger, let's say one pull of the trigger, that is one round being spent or being sent down range, okay? Full auto, you hold the trigger, that's when you get multiple rounds per trigger pull, all right? And of course, you got different variations on that, bursts, so on and so forth, but we're not here to talk about that today. But with that, I'll give a little bit of my own personal experience as well, because I grew up and I shot my first gun, which I have sitting right over there on the wall, my dad's 44 Underwood M1 carbine, when I was just 7 years old. But what really struck my family, and, just to kind of give all of our backgrounds, because we've all been affected by one way or another, something negative happening with a firearm. And one thing that's common through all of this, though, is it takes the action of an individual to actually happen, to make these tragedies take place. Like you said before, Rob, the firearm itself is a tool. It's not just going to pick itself up and do any type of damage. With that being said, before he was 2 years old, my oldest brother passed away and was killed because of a negligent discharge of a firearm. Somebody got a hold of a gun, thought it was a toy, didn't know anything about it, and then put it to my brother's head and pulled the trigger and killed him right there. And so my father, he was only 18 or 19 at the time, and, having to carry his son to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Now, my father, took a really pro-2A stance and wanted to actually teach education over everything, because he did not blame the gun, but just like both of you guys, he did not blame the gun for that situation. He blamed the person and their ignorance around firearms for why that occurred. And my entire thing when I grew up was, the moment you can tell me the basic safety rules, the fundamentals, and you can field strip and reassemble the firearm, I'll let you take it out back and go shoot it, right? And that's exactly the premise that I grew up with. And so we've all been affected, even though me indirectly, have been affected by something taking place with a firearm. And a lot of it has to do with evil actions or negligence and ignorance. And I think that's something that we can try to help today. And I actually want to welcome somebody else really quick too, who just joined right now. We've got Aaron Suozzo. Aaron, good to see you, bro.
Mr. Morgan, how are you, sir?
Man, I am doing well, man. I'm really happy you could join us. For anybody that doesn't know, Aaron and I worked together at Classic Firearms for a bit, and he's a really good friend of mine. And I love you, man, and I'm extremely excited that you're here to join us on this conversation. And we've gotten kind of just over kind of our personal experiences, and the question that I was getting into was, talking about what moment in your life most shaped your view of firearms. But I think you can kind of roll into that as you kind of give a brief introduction for anybody that might be watching that doesn't know you.
Yes, Aaron Suozzo, former law enforcement, retired in 2021 out in Hayward, California. Involved in umpteen critical incidents out there, and then from there got to the firearms industry, right into the Mr. Morgan. Man, I mean, the world has been crazy for me. Right now, I'm executive director of 343 Fund, which is a nonprofit for mental health first responders. I can get more into that later on down the line. We'll talk more about that, but that's kind of the brief of my journey, and there's a whole lot to my story, but we're here to talk about something else, which I told Clint I wanted to be a part of this.
Yeah, hey, man. So,
Aaron,
go ahead, Rob.
Yes, sir.
I'm former Union City Police, man.
Are you serious? Oh, wait, hold on. Can I curse on this?
yeah, you're good.
No shit. When'd you retire?
Yes, sir. So I was with Union City. So I started with Stockton Unified PE as an officer in 2004. Went out to Union City in 2007 and worked there till 2016 before transferring back to Stockton Unified as a sergeant. And so finished my last 7 years out there.
You know Bilotti?
Oh, yeah.
I went to the academy at Bilotti. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, man. So, I worked under Daryl McAllister when he came over.
Yeah. From Hayward.
Yeah, that's my guy, man.
Yeah, that's too cool. I love the small world stuff, man.
Well, so there's 2 lanes of traffic that separate Hayward from Union City, man. So it's pretty much the same department. It's just different shoulder patches.
Literally.
So it's one big.
Yeah, in FTR, I definitely took Mission Boulevard way too far south several times and ended up in.
Oh man, I used to poach in Hayward, bro. So it's all right.
I know you guys did. We can talk about that later.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm glad that again, this is that community too. The firearms industry is already pretty small as it is, and then you start running into the law enforcement community, the more military side of things too, and you start to learn that everybody knows everybody because. Steven and Rob, I know you guys know each other, but y'all didn't know Aaron before this, right?
No.
Aaron,
right,
it's good to meet you.
So, I mean, just
nice to meet you too. Sorry about that.
You're good, man. You're good. So, no, that's too freaking cool, man. So, Aaron, what was the moment in your life that most shaped your view of firearms, and specifically not as a policy issue, but as something deeply personal?
Firearms, honestly. So I got involved with firearms later on in life. It was probably right around the academy time. Because as you would know, I went to Alameda County, and honestly, I suck, man. My firearms shooting was absolute garbage. And I had an understanding for how good I wanted to be, and then obviously getting on the SWAT team and everything like that, but never really took in consideration up until I got into the academy that I need to start training up with using it. And I shot guns before that, but didn't understand the proficiency level that I needed and the training up and everything that was involved in it. And when I went to the academy, I couldn't hit the side of a barn. Couldn't do it. And it was Jeff Reed. Some people know Jeff Reed is over at Alameda County, man. And the man's a great, great trainer. And I had an issue with getting my qualification done. So he comes up to me, looks at my gun, turns it upside down. When he turns it upside down, gives it back to me, he goes, okay, now shoot it upside down. I'm telling you, I was lights out, upside down with this gun. So he goes, okay, turn it back over, right side up, lights out. And that was the point in my life where something transitioned in my brain with firearms and how much more in depth I wanted to be with it, proficiency-wise, all the above when it came to utilizing the firearm. And I knew what I had to do, and then thank God I got proficient with it because I got into more than enough shootings out there on Hayward. And man, that was kind of the moment where it kind of really sunk into my brain of the firearms industry and then just firearms utilization, honestly, when it came to things. So I would say that was probably my moment.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. That's something I'd have to try, figure out shooting something upside down versus right side up. And, other than trying to do trick shots.
It worked. It worked. Whatever it was that Reed was doing, man, he knew what he was doing. So
yeah, it's too cool, man. So Aaron, just in case you don't know, I've got a list of questions that's been submitted by the community that's all around firearms and kind of this roundtable discussion about how we can prevent these tragedies from taking place again. And I think the biggest thing that really comes down to is on a small scale, which can equate to a very large scale, is education. Ignorance, I think, breeds fear for what you don't know. Right. And I think one of the biggest things is look, firearms in this country, they're not going to go away. Whether they're all outlawed tomorrow or not, they are not going to go away. We've got, of one type of firearm alone, you've got almost, 10% of about 10% of the population, about 30 million of just the AR. It might even be more than that now. So it's kind of like, okay, you can try to regulate evil, you can try to regulate inanimate objects, but at the end of the day, it's not going to go away. I mean, we can take a look at the war on drugs. It almost seems like anything that government gets their hands in that they want to prevent from spreading, it winds up spreading even more. War on drugs, war on terror, war on guns. Seems like a good equation to get more guns, which I know a lot of us probably wouldn't complain about. But I really want this discussion to be really open, honest dialogue. And I want it to be something that anybody can send to a anti-gunner or somebody like that might just be also curious, gun curious, whatever you want to call it. And so one of the big questions here around personal experience and meaning that we've got next is, do you ever feel conflicted, torn between your beliefs about freedom and the realities of violence you've seen or heard about? And all three of you have obviously had very intimate experiences with violence. And so that question, do you ever feel conflicted, torn between your beliefs about freedom and the realities of violence you've seen or heard about? I'll let Stephen, I'll let you kind of take that one initially and get your point of view.
Well, every time I hear about one of these shootings, and even before Sutherland Springs itself, it struck personal to me. It was really personal. As far as torn between my beliefs, no, my heart went out for everyone that died. But I knew that at some point, the only thing that was going to stop it was when the other gun got into the fight. When police showed up or whatever. And when that second gun shows up to the fight, and I understand it, I spoke with AJ Louderback, and he was working with Donald Trump in his first term. And AJ Louderback is a sheriff here in Texas, and he talked about even if he said, let's play the liberal nirvana for a moment. Let's say that they outlaw guns and every criminal and every law-abiding citizen goes in and turns their guns in. He said the drug cartels across the border, they are they're using full automatic M16s and full automatic AK-47s and rocket propelled grenade launchers. They don't get them from this side of the border. They get them through the black market. And he said, even if we could even clear up the black market, he said, the drug cartels have a $500 billion budget, and they could set up the world's largest gun manufacturing plant on their side of the border and create firearms. And then we have already banned everything for every law-abiding citizen. And now the only one that has the guns left are the drug cartels, and they give them to who they want. So yes, that horse is out of the barn, and we cannot put the horse back in the barn. The guns are there, and they will continue to be there. Look at France and how many times that they have had terrorists that came in with full automatics, and they walked right down the streets of France and murdered police officers, because even the police officers didn't have guns. They went right to the cartoonist office and murdered him because no one else could stop it.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take someone with a gun to be able to stop. And if you're willing to wait in Sutherland Springs, it took the police 19 minutes to respond to Sutherland Springs, Texas. And my community didn't have another 19 minutes to hang in there.
What, in a town that you said only had a population of 600? Oh, yeah. Why 19 minutes?
Because we are a small town. We don't have our own police department. We depend on the sheriff's department.
I see. Okay.
We're not even a township or anything like that. We are a town in name only. We have a post office, so it gives us a name.
I see. Okay.
We're in a very small county that doesn't even have a big sheriff's department or anything else. So they had to wait until police could make it there. And I'm not disrespecting police in any way. Never disrespect a person dressed in blue or whatever that is coming to your aid, coming to save your life, and they don't even know your name. But the fact is they can't be there all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Rob, getting back into it over here, again, your personal experiences, do you ever feel torn or conflicted about your beliefs about freedom and the realities of the violence?
No, not at all. I'm never going to apologize for my stance. I am empathetic to people's outlook because of maybe their lack of experience, right? I try to leave emotion out of my message, and I have opportunities all the time to speak across the country at different, conferences and, podcasts, and I've been asked to speak a lot. And, so I've had the opportunity to share, and I continue to share my story, not because of, a spotlight thing, but I think my story is compelling, being able to speak as a victim of one of the very first mass school shootings, having been shot, and also as a first responder. Cleveland Elementary School in Stockton, California, of all places, very urban area. It's in the heart of the city, and it still took over 3 minutes for law enforcement to get on scene. A lot can happen in 3 minutes. 29 of my classmates were shot. 5 were killed as the gunman, was doing this thing, and as the law enforcement was getting on scene, right? It's over. So, I tell people, and seconds matter in these circumstances. And what is the equalizer? Like Steven said, the only thing that's going to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with the gun. I've spent the last few years working as an emergency preparedness consultant, and guns aren't the end all be all, but it's a huge part of it, right? When you have a gunman showing up to inflict as much carnage as possible, they know time is not on their side because they know law enforcement's en route, and they're looking for those soft targets. And we've seen too many times now, school district officials, whether they be teachers or, campus security or whatever, that are unarmed, having to defend children and defend their staff empty-handed against evil that's armed with firearms. And we're never going to be able to legislate evil out of existence, right? And so, yeah, no, I unapologetically defend that stance of no. I mean, we need to have good people, able-minded people to think through the problem, to work through the problem, to address that situation. And by all means, let law enforcement do their thing once they get on scene, but you might have to hold the fort down for a couple minutes. Yeah. And that's a long time. And when you don't have the right tool, you're going to be wishing you did.
Yeah. Aaron.
So first of all, let me empathize with both of you guys. I've never been involved in a scenario that you guys have been in reference to an active shooter or watching my classmates or anything in that aspect be put down in front of me and not be able to do anything or anybody be there for me. So I empathize with that scenario. With that being said, I'm unapologetic for my stance also. I have to piggyback with Rob. With all that being said of what you guys just said, I think there is a solution to what we have going on here. Because like you guys said, and like we know, Rob, it takes, even at Hayward, at night, if you put me in Hayward at 1 o'clock in the morning, I could get there 3 minutes, and that's me doing 110 miles an hour as fast as I can to get from one spot to the next. That's still, I mean, you give me a minute, you get a proficient individual in a softened area, you're taking out a whole lot of people. A whole lot of people. Why are we not utilizing options that we have in this world, especially the United States? We train up a lot of men and women, not just cops, to do things. And then when they get out of the military, I'm talking about the military aspect of things, with special forces, your tier 1 guys that are around doing private company or contracting work. Why do we not have in a reference to like some sort of QRF that are sitting in front of these soft targets or a roaming type of patrol in a sense? Maybe they don't have arrestabilities. I'm not going to get the logistics down correctly with this, but something where they are a QRF for any sort of issue, or they're just sitting in front of these schools out of sight, out of mind, until God forbid somebody's coming up. Because I'll tell you, and we all know, these guys put these softened targets for a reason, because they're going to have no friction. They're not going to have 2 guys hit it up that are going to be waiting there for them. And as soon as they see them, they're going to drop them. And the party's done. Like, why don't we have that in place? And I know why we don't have it in place. And then people can say, oh, it's too militaristic looking, blah, blah, blah. And it's a small window of people are thinking about that. Because I have kids. I don't know if you guys have kids on Clint. I know you do now. But I'm okay with seeing 2, 3 guys sitting down, kitted up, and God forbid something's happened, they're there to take care of something. I feel a whole lot safer walking my kids into that school. I do, 100%.
Yeah.
Because I know if I'm around the corner, I'm coming to do the same exact thing that they would do.
Right. And the thing is, though, like, for instance, one of my neighbors here, she has no issues with firearms whatsoever. She likes that I shoot in my backyard. She feels safe about it. But when I've talked about having, armed guards at school, things like that, she's like, that just seems kind of scary. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I understand it might be scary. The reality of the situation that we live in, though, is that the world is a scary place, that evil exists. And the best way to counteract evil is to destroy it with overwhelming power. And that's going to be wielded by good people that have been trained up to use such tools.
And my question is, what's scarier than that? Knowing that the guy got into the building, you don't know if your kid or not is dead. But if you tell me, he didn't even get in the building, he was handled, it's a little less scary for me. Honestly.
Well, right. Here in California in 2018, up until 2018, the superintendents of schools were able to delegate staff members who had CCWs and carried privileges to be able to carry while they worked on campus. And then our current administration, Gavin Newsom and his cronies, they, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it is what it is. They took that authority away from school district superintendents. And, even having the armed guards, that's just a piece of it, right? Because, like I worked at James Logan High School in Union City as a school resource officer, 64 and a half acres. And I was the only SRO on campus, right? The only person that was supposed to have a gun. And, I tell people, man, if I was at corner X and a gunman entered corner C and I had to hoof it on foot, you're still waiting on patrol to get there to back me up. And again, a lot of stuff can happen. I tell a story of a guy that I had the privilege of working with in San Joaquin County. He was a retired sergeant from San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office, worked there for like 26 years, him and his brother both. He retires. He goes to work for the DA's office as a sworn investigator for another 5 years. And then he comes over to the school district police where I went as a sergeant my last 7 years of my career, different retirement system. And he got hired as a police sergeant. He's double dipping. God bless him for doing it, right? Making good money. And then he works another 5 years and retires again. And his hobby was that he liked to do side work as a substitute teacher within the same school district that has their own police department, right, that he worked for. And when he retired out of law enforcement, he still taught part-time, and he couldn't carry his gun, while he taught. And this was the same guy that 6 months prior, if 911 was called, he was expected to show up with the gun, and he couldn't carry when he taught. It makes no sense to me, right? And it's that type of mindset and that type of stuff that just, it gets under my skin, man. It's like, why are we doing that? Why are we limiting our able-bodied, able-minded heroes, right, basically, that are willing to step in the front of danger and evil?
It's not only that mindset, too. It's our most prized possessions are our kids. Mm-hmm. We will protect everything else with every gun under the sun, but we won't protect the most prized possessions. That's what blows my mind. I can't get that.
Yeah.
I heard about a school in Corpus Christi, Texas. Now, it's a private school. They can do whatever they want. But this school in Corpus Christi, Texas, advertises they want combat veterans. Not just veterans. They want combat veterans to apply. And they put them in full tack gear, walking up and down the school hallways with AR-15s hanging on their chest, high-fiving and fist-bumping the children going up and down the hallways. I would send my grandchildren to that school.
100%.
They want men that have been shot at before in battle and didn't run from it. And like you were saying, Rob, you're talking about just one school resource officer is not enough. Look at what happened in Parkland. The one school resource officer that was there hid behind a column while 7 more students were murdered. So, that's tough. But if there's more than one, and here's what I truly believe. I believe courage is contagious. And courage, if somebody steps up and runs into that battle, other people will follow. And I believe cowardice is contagious too. And we need to put men and women in those schools that have exhibited courage.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. You say that.
No, I absolutely agree to that as well. Which actually brings me up to another point. Somebody, because when we hear these types of things, we already know that cost is a lot of what kind of prevents some of these things. And one person on Instagram submitted, we could harden American schools for less than one payment to Ukraine. And I don't know statistically if that's, or financially if that's correct or not, but I'm assuming it is. Why don't we? We could harden American schools for less than one payment to Ukraine. Why don't we? And I think all of us here would agree that, well, we would love to see that. As for why haven't we? Why don't we? I'm going to have a really difficult time answering that question because I'm not in one of those policymakers' shoes that would actually deny our children the same safety that banks or politicians are getting. So I don't know if you guys have a take on that or not.
I'll say something about it. How about this? And you could agree with this, Paul. How about all the payouts we give to some of these guys and girls on the streets? We put all that money towards them. Why don't we put that towards our kids in our schools? That is more money than we need to protect our kids in the schools. I mean, I will say you can touch into that little bank account. And I'm saying that now because I'm retired, but I think that's definitely a route to go.
Yeah. Understand that it doesn't have to cost that much. And in the state of Texas, we have the Guardian program and we have the School Marshal program, and both of which are volunteer faculty and teachers that will carry in the class, and they volunteer to do it, and they also volunteer to take training. And what's crazy about it is they train in the summer program with the local law enforcement. So they go into their school during the summer when there's no school taking place, and these teachers train with the law enforcement. And this is a great point, because what happens if a school shooting happens, the law enforcement are on there. They come running in, and these teachers have trained with law enforcement. The law enforcement knows who the teachers are that are carrying guns. The students do not, but the law enforcement does, because they've trained with them. And it's a volunteer thing. The left always says, well, I'm a teacher, I'm not gonna carry a gun. Well, we're not trying to force anyone to carry a gun. But if you're of the type of person like myself, or when we shot as the Sinners, our church team was called the Sinners. We shot against a group that called themselves the X-Buster, and out of all 5 of the X-Busters, 3 of them were teachers. Why not arm those teachers at a school? That's not going to cost anything extra. However, even in the state of Texas, promoted a bill that would pay teachers that take part in the School Marshal or the Guardian program. It would pay them $25,000 extra per year to be part of that. Now, that comes with training and stuff, but that's an extra $25,000 straight from the state, not from the school district. It comes straight from the state.
That's pretty awesome, if you ask me. I mean, That's one hell of an incentive to seek further training, and also to be able to defend yourself and also your students, more importantly, at your school. Why not? That's a really cool program.
That's an extra boost for a teacher.
Yeah, for sure. And go ahead. Yeah, but no, I was just going to say that, teachers, it's already known that teachers are, not well paid. I would totally seek it, which kind of follows up to the next question, because, we've got teachers saying that, hey, I'm a teacher, I'm not an armed guard or anything like that. Well, I'm not either, but I still carry my gun every day. What do you think it would take for someone like me who asked this question, who has only known fear around guns, to see them the way that we do, and vice versa? I think what they're ultimately asking is, what would it take for someone who has only been afraid of guns, I guess they're seemingly their entire life, to see them as we do? I mean, me, I've got them displayed obviously on my wall back here. I have one with me pretty much all the time. And, initially my biggest thing is, familiarization, right? Just education, get out there, take some classes, go to a gun range, and seek reputable instruction from reputable instructors. Let's see, Rob, I think you and I think we all agree on that kind of take, but if you have anything more to add to that, let me know.
Yeah, there's no just one right answer to any of these questions, and I'm sitting here racking my brain going, all right. And when you were reading that last question, I was just saying, in my head, I heard, be the change, be willing to be the difference in somebody else's life. And if you come across somebody and say, you're an avid shooter, even if you just know the basics, if you could take the time, invite them out to shoot with you, hopefully you're training with your firearm. I've seen a lot of good things happen when I've been able to do that. And, I had a friend who the only the only thing that she knew about guns is when her ex-husband beat the crap out of her and put a gun to her head, right? Like 10 years prior. She didn't grow up around firearms, and she was terrified around guns. So I said, all right, she called me. She said, hey, I don't know what to do. I feel like I want to learn how to shoot. And I said, okay, first thing, let's go meet at the gun shop. And I have a buddy who owned a gun shop, and I met her over there, and I just had her hold one, right? I said, okay, just pick one out. And she picked this pink, painted pistol, and I think it was a Glock or something. And they put it on the counter, and I just took her over to the corner, and I had her pointed at a wall, right? And she's sitting there, she's shaking. I go, now put it down. She put it down. I had her pick it back up and do some repetitions with me. All right, this is how you drop the magazine. This is how you lock the slide back. And had her do some dry fire exercises and just worked with her in baby steps. And then the next weekend, her brother, her mom, a friend of hers came out to the range with me, and I got her to shoot. And she was terrified, man. She was in tears, but I encouraged her to work through that fear. You know what's cool about her? That's like my success story, because she teaches other women how to shoot now. And she's taken other trainings, right? Because somebody was able to, and not tooting my own horn, excuse me, not tooting my own horn, but I took the time to work with her, and I identified that, hey, she's been traumatized. This is going to take baby steps. And I was willing to just work with her. If you have that opportunity, do it, because I think a lot of people will realize that it is just a tool, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, how about you, man?
First of all, I got to apologize, Rob. I was calling you Paul this whole time. I just realized it, so I apologize about that.
And I realized, I think I heard that, and I was like, wait a minute, let me add the names really quick, because I forgot to do that at the beginning of this. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, thank you. But again, I'll piggyback off Rob with what he was saying. There isn't just one way to skin a cat with this whole scenario. First of all, if somebody is open-minded and willing and wanting to get into this space, get a reputable, somebody that you trust that is willing to work with you. And I mean, it's baby steps. You got to start from the basics. You're not going to be a Keanu Reeves of shooting and be a John Wick in 2 days. I mean, even myself and guys here, we're not in that level. And we've been doing this for how many years now? It takes time. But I also am in the belief that it's not for everybody also, So if it is something that you're not open to it, I hold space for you in that area too. That's actually, I'll applaud you for that. That this is not something for you. Thank you for letting me know that. So we don't have a tool that can be utilized in a bad way. And you have no idea what you're doing. You're not open to training. And then one day you are put in a position to use that tool that you have no idea what you're dealing with. And then we all know how that could also go. So I also just commend people that have that mindset and that have that knowing, and leave it to individuals that want to and know and are of knowledge, sound mind, and know the ins and outs, the ups and downs, because there are goods and bads to having that power of that weapon in your hand. So I think that it's definitely something that, if you are open-minded to it, work with somebody like Rob was saying, take the time, take the baby steps. Like you said, have them hold it. Just learning how to hold a firearm the right way. Let them know everything's not like the movies. Just be comfortable in that space and take your time. Be comfortable about that. And then once you're able to move a little bit faster, take it from there. But I think just figure out what's out there. I mean, there's a million guns out here these days. Everything's different. Everything shoots different, feels different. Understanding the ins and outs of it. I mean, even from when I started working with you guys, Clinic Classic, I was fairly decent at shooting a firearm. But then when I got into the space of you and Ryan and those guys, I was like, I know nothing about guns. So just know that there's a whole lot more out there to learn on a daily basis. Be open-minded to learning. Be trainable, be coachable. So I think that's some of the knowledge that you definitely want to have when you get into this space.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's one of those things, and Jason over at Classic is the first one I heard say it, was, always be the student, always encourage yourself to learn more, get educated. You might have mastered that Texas Star at 20 feet. Now back up to 30 feet, do it again, right? Keep pushing yourself and keep seeking that higher education, so that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Let me add one more piece to this too, and train in realistic scenarios. is my
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because you brought up the whole star now. Like a lot of guys and girls, they're great at shooting a piece of paper that's not moving and going nowhere. Let's train in the scenarios that we're going to potentially utilize our firearms. And I think is another factor.
Yeah, like in Steven's case, when he took that one class to negotiate a threat wearing body armor, that just goes to show just focusing on shot placement and how critical that can be sometimes. Like shooting a Texas Star, for those of you that are watching that don't know, it's ultimately a target that's got multiple plates on the end of these legs, and when you shoot one, it falls off and the thing starts moving, and then as you shoot more and more, it starts switching which way it's going and everything else. It's challenging but a lot of fun, but that goes to teach shot placement, just making impact on a large steel target. Just hearing that steel ring is cool, but if you're aiming center mass and you're hitting low right every single time or low left, then that's really not going to do you any favors when you're shooting at a much smaller target and you have a where, again, point of impact is so much more significant. But finishing up this question here, Stephen, what do you think it would take for someone like this individual asking, who's only been fear around guns, to see firearms how we do?
I absolutely had a very unique experience teaching somebody. So a guy came to Sutherland Springs after the shooting had happened, and he was doing a documentary. And this guy had been shot at in the rock and roll concert in France. And he hid in a women's bathroom and survived it. And he was pretty terrified of guns. And when he heard about Sutherland Springs, he came to do a documentary because of what he had been through before. And he came to me and said, I really want an interview with you. His name was Henri. And I said, have you ever shot a gun before? He said, I've never held a gun before. I said, then come to a shooting range with me and we'll shoot. And then afterwards, I'll give you an interview. And so I started him out with a 22 rifle and moved him all the way up to a 30-06. I started him with a 22 pistol and moved him all the way up to a 45, and then even a 454 Casull. And at the end of it all, we went over and we sat underneath the shade tree to do the interview. And you couldn't wipe the smile off his face. He had never handled a gun before, and he was always terrified of them because of what happened to him. But I taught him very first the basics of safety. And said, look, if you do something wrong, I'm going to call you on it, and I'm going to make sure that you're not unsafe, first and foremost. And I'm going to make sure that you go home today with the exact number of holes in your body that God gave you, no more. And once he was comfortable with the idea that I was not going to let him make a mistake, then he started shooting and started enjoying it. And at the end of the interview, I said, so what did you think of the interview? And he said, Mr. Willeford, he said, journalism is like fishing. And someday you sit out there in the boat, fish all day, and you get nothing. He said, today, my boat's so full, it's sinking. He was so happy about the interview and where it went and the opportunity to shoot and to be more familiar with firearms, so he would have a different perspective on where his documentary was going.
Yeah, that's, again, if you're only exposed to the negativity of something, then all you're going to think is negative thoughts about whatever that subject might be, right? If all you know about cars is, well, car crashes and that there's more fatalities driving than there are through shootings every year, then you're probably going to, and that's all you know about cars, but never mind being able to go to the grocery store and fit all of your groceries into your back of your minivan and driving that home without having to carry all that, a few miles each way. Right. So these conveniences are nice, but if you're exposed to nothing but negative things about a certain particular subject, then all you're going to think are negative thoughts. So again, exposing people to the positives. And education, I think, is probably the biggest thing is here, is just getting people informed and getting some personal experience in a safe environment where somebody can feel comfortable in. Because one of the biggest things I've always said is like going to an indoor range. Yeah, it's not always my favorite though, right? You got somebody there that's shooting a 7-inch AR with a muzzle brake right next to you, and even though you're wearing 3 sets of ear pro, it's still going to rattle your brain housing group, and it's crazy, right? And it's like, man, if I'm taking somebody to shoot for the very first time and that's all they've known, and it's just like, okay, yeah, this is a little wild. So going somewhere to even a private range, paying for a private day at the range, getting somebody really comfortable is where it's at. And I'm fortunate enough, and I think just like you, Steve, and Rob, Aaron, I'm not too sure about you guys, but I know we've got enough property and ranges even on our property to where I can bring new shooters, young shooters out to shoot for the very first time, and they don't have to worry about anybody else shooting. They're in a nice, calm, comfortable environment, and they can start making hits on target. And it's a lot of fun to watch them, exactly like what you're describing, Steve, and like what you said, Rob. Was that Carrie, by the way?
Me?
Yeah. The woman that you got shooting.
Oh no, her name is Felicia.
Actually. Oh, I was gonna say that
yeah.
sounded really similar to her story,
yeah.
too. Who's a wonderful woman also. But anyway, getting somebody out in these comfortable environments to start shooting is I think where it's at. These next couple of questions are pretty difficult ones for those that have experienced loss in this world. So, for those of us who have lost loved ones to gun violence, it can feel impossible to understand why anyone would defend the very thing that caused our loss. How do you hold space for that grief while still holding your position? And I've got some thoughts on that one there, but Aaron, I'll let you go ahead and take that one if you want to, man.
So I haven't lost anybody extremely close to me, but Rob, you know about this one. We had, first year I was getting into the academy, we had one of our sergeants get shot and killed.
Scott Lunger.
Yeah, Scott Lunger got shot and killed. And I still hold space in reference to that because the individual that was able to engage that suspect potentially saved other people and potentially himself from getting shot, because who knows what that guy would have done if he wasn't getting engaged back the same with the amount of violence that he was getting engaged with to get the hell out of there. So like we've said before, there's only one way to stop that type of violence, and that's with another level of violence to end what they were doing originally. And there is a certain type of individual in this world that you need to assist with delivering that package to whoever made it. I'm saying this in the nicest way possible because we're on the show here, but I think everybody understands what I'm saying when I say that. So it's unfortunate that we need to do it, but it is needed. And it's something that's been around since day one. It's unfortunate. It was spears at one point in time, knives at another point in time, and it's escalated. So now we have technologies to do other things, but that is where we are with it. So having experience, like I said, in a matter of anybody that was in my family, but when Lunger had gotten shot and killed, that one struck real close. And I didn't really know him that well, but being in that police department and with our police department, he was a SWAT commander, like it hit home hard when that happened. And seeing how it happened also, it was like, okay, I see what has to be done here. And we need these type of people with these abilities, and you have to have the ability to protect yourself and your family at the end of the day. You need it. There are individuals in this world, and I say it's 1% of people. 99% of people in this world are good people, guys. We all know that. We do stupid things as individuals. But there is 1% of people in this world that we have to protect ourselves, our families from. And end of the day, we call 911. But like we talked about, 3, 4, 5, 19 minutes away, we're waiting. We have the ability to take care of that. Let's take care of that. So that's kind of my thought process on that.
Yeah, I haven't taken the 911 calls before too. It is one of those things where it's like you get that. I mean, just again, being that guy that's the mediator between the person needing help and that officer. I've been the 911 call taker and dispatcher working out of Cornelius Police Department in North Carolina. So we were smaller, so we didn't have separate dispatchers from call takers. So, in one ear, I'm listening to this person yelling and screaming, crying bloody murder. And then the other ear, I'm trying to relay and listen to the officers coming up on scene while also trying to give them like, hey, we've got, individual demographic looks like this, here's everything else. Does he have a weapon? They're yelling at me. I don't know what kind of weapon he's got. It's wild to think about. But yeah, but thinking about those that have lost ones to what they're calling gun violence, having, and I'm sure each of us have been affected by this, suicides also.
Yeah.
So again, I hold this space of grief and, a little bit of remorse too about not making myself better, I guess, just known that, hey, I can be somebody to talk to without judgment or anything like that. But also I know that, like I've said before, that evil exists, and I want to protect myself, loved ones, and the good innocent people out there, that if I have the opportunity and ability to do that, then I would like to think that in that situation I would step up and be able to do that, but I would need to make sure I have the right tool in my possession to do that with.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to take the best of what's available and what makes sense. As much as I'd love to carry around my Mark 18 as my concealed carry every day, that's not going to make sense. So Stephen, I'll move it on to you about, for those that have lost ones to gun violence, how can you defend the very thing that caused their loss? How do you hold space for that grief while holding your position?
Understand first and foremost that I lost people in Sutherland Springs that I cared deeply about. Yeah. Again, I'm generation under 600 people total population in Sutherland Springs. My kids went to Awanas at that church. I deliver toys every December with that church on the motorcycle. I'm their Santa Claus, and that's why the beard's growing out now. So these people that were in that church were very much part of my, I guess, extended family, if you will. I cared deeply about them. So I did lose people in that church. I lost people that were very personal. And then I went to Texas to the state capitol, and they used all the family members from the Uvalde shooting to try to push their agenda of gun control. And I was there, and I met those family members. I was threatened by a man that lost a 9-year-old daughter because I was testifying against what he believed. And he threatened me, and I looked at him and I said, I don't think you understand. I would have died for your daughter. I would have gone into the room, and if it demanded, I would have sacrificed my life to save his daughter. And that's what he needs to understand. Where police were sitting outside the door, I would have been in there. And that's a terrible thing to say, but out of everyone that was there at the Capitol, I could sympathize and empathize with him more than anyone else could. And he chose to look at me as a adversary, so much that he said, I had to bury my daughter, and you disagree with me, so you're the bad guy. And my response is, I would have died to sacrifice myself so your 9-year-old daughter could live. Why am I the bad guy?
Yeah, and I would say too that I think just through two of us here being law enforcement, myself have just finished my stint in the Marines now, almost 14 and a half or almost 15 years, and then through your actions alone, Stephen, I think all of us would be willing to make some sort of sacrifice to save the lives of the innocent and the good, the young, and I think that can go without saying for many people. As Aaron pointed out, a majority of people in the world, I believe a majority of people are good. And it's just the ones that are so evil, the ones that are consumed with hate, that get all of the screen time, unfortunately. And so it seems like it's a lot more prevalent than it really is. And those that you see that are actually doing good, that doesn't get as much attention. That doesn't get as much attention. So Rob,
need to know.
yeah.
People need to know that I did lose people that I cared about. It really made me angry when someone said you care more about your guns than you do children.
Oh yeah.
I understand. I took my gun to defend children. I was more worried about their lives than I was even my own. You'd think I cared more about my gun than I did those in the church. You would be wrong.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think all of us would agree too. If I knew, giving up my guns would actually save a child's life, then okay, sure. I'll take you on that. But I carry a gun to protect my children. So for somebody to say that, you love your guns more than your children. No, I love my children so much that I carry a gun, that I train with it, that I'm proficient with it.
Amen.
So, that's a very wrong perspective, I think, by saying you love your guns more than your children. With that, Rob, what are your thoughts about, how do you hold the space for grief while holding your position?
I've had to address this almost my entire life, since 1989. And, there was a teacher group that was birthed out of the Cleveland elementary school shooting, and they work very, very closely with the Brady campaign. And so their number one goal is to, promote, new gun laws and gun restrictions. And I had to take a step back when that group was formed. And these were one of them's my former teacher. These are women who I love dearly. They just don't have the same mindset as me. And I realized that people have to cast blame on something sometimes when horrible things happen to continue operating, to continue living on and continue pushing on. They have to push the blame off, whether it's because of guilt or, I could have done something more. Now I feel like I have to do something. And that's the choice that they decided to go. Yeah. I've also done a lot of interviews throughout the years because of my experiences. And I've had reporters that try to bait me against this teacher group and, try to get me to say something foul about them or something negative. And I don't. I protect their right to believe how they believe, right? It's not going to change my mindset or my stance. And ultimately, we have the same goal of we don't want any other kid to get hurt, right? Mm-hmm. And so I can respect that. I don't have to agree with their ideology. I too have had friends that have committed suicide with firearms. I've had family that have committed suicide with firearms. Obviously, working for 2 decades as a cop, I've seen a lot of carnage because of somebody who took a firearm and shot a bunch of people. And I've seen the devastation. I've had to sit there with families and tell them that their loved ones weren't coming home because of the choice of an individual. And I guess with me personally, even as a child, I started off in the interview saying I've never blamed the gun. I never blamed an inanimate object for the choice of a madman. Mm-hmm. And again, evil's always going to exist. And that's what we have to hold on to, and we have to understand is we're never going to be able to legislate evil out of existence. It's always going to show its ugly face at some point. And again, a gun is a tool. With that being said, we have to not forget about compassion and empathy. And sometimes we have to meet people at their need and be a little bit more patient with them, right? And compassionate about what they're going through, without being apologetic, at the same time for what we believe in. I think that's important. I think we can sit there and love on people and have compassion for people and still hold on to our beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, did you have an opportunity to speak about this one?
Yeah, I did. I'm just going to add something to what Rob said, man. It's a coping mechanism also. You need a scapegoat. You need something, like you said, something to blame. Sure. You need something to blame at those times. But you also said it the right way, and it's going to take away a little bit from the conversation, is that you have to love on people also and understand that they just went through something extremely traumatic. And eventually, they'll come around. I think everybody has an understanding that they need protection in this world, regardless if they agree or disagree on the way that they're protected. Mm-hmm. But I think everybody has that understanding at the end of the day. But I just wanted to add that photo, Rob.
Yeah, which, and it's ironic to this next question, Stephen, I mean, you actually, I mean, you did this. If you sat across from a parent who buried their child after a school shooting, what would you want them to know about your heart, not your politics? And Stephen, we got that, directly from you right now, and you experienced that, you lived that, so thank you. And again, I think there's nothing more beautiful than to say, that like, hey, you can be mad at me all you want for defending the firearm, but at the end of it all, you took the action. I took the action, if I'm speaking from your perspective, to run in there and defend your daughter if given the opportunity with a firearm. Willing to sacrifice your life, willing to put yourself in harm's way. And again, both Aaron and Rob being law enforcement, I have a feeling that, you guys, knowing both of you individually, I don't doubt one bit if you got the, now we need to sit and wait outside order, that's something that probably wouldn't sit well with you guys when you hear the gunshots, when you hear lives being lost. Just on the other side of the door. And yeah, I believe that. But, would want to say to a parent, after, if we're going really specific with like the school shooting, what would I want them to know about my heart is that, I've got nothing but love and sympathy for them, and that I would want, if I could do anything to, being a parent now, as we all are, I can only imagine what that might be like, but I can't do it successfully, and I don't ever want to. And so if I had one of those parents sitting across from me, asking that question, or just wanting to know about my heart, is I don't blame them for how they feel, but I would implore them to seek that. At the end of the day, it's a tool, and how it's used, it can be used for good or evil. And we'll see a lot of times it is actually used for good. But it's just, again, as we've already hit on too, a lot of the negative, a lot of the bad is what's reported on, and we don't see a lot of the good that's actually done. Aaron, Rob, I don't know if you guys have more you want to add to that one or not.
No, I mean, I don't know what else can be said. It's, again, you got to realize that you're dealing with hurt people, in these circumstances. And just, and Clint, you can, all of us, we've seen kind of the bullying that goes on sometimes in the gun community. It's a real thing. It happens sometimes, because, for different reasons. But I think just reminding ourselves that we're dealing with hurt people, and sometimes they need to be dealt with a little bit softer. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also let them know, like Steven, you said it before. I mean, I would lay my life down for your kid. Would have done it. Steven, you said it exactly the same way. You went to that building knowing that you would have turned that corner in Uvalde. Everybody would have went into that room, made that hard left, and would have taken a round for those kids, just to make sure one of those kids survived. I think every one of us would have done that, knowing what we were giving up also. And without a doubt in our mind, a doubt in my mind, I think every one of us would have done the same. So, and again, like Rob said, you got to show them love and somewhat of empathy. Understanding is a hard word to say you have it, because obviously they know there's something we're not, but it's a hard topic discussion. But let them know that you're there for them, and that it's an open-minded conversation to have once things kind of settle down a little bit, and how we can prevent this, because a lot of these are preventable. I'm sorry to say, but a lot of these are preventable.
For sure, which kind of brings us to our next question in a sense, because this person asked, what kind of America do you want my children to grow up in? How does your vision for guns fit into that picture? And I think we can kind of take a look at it. It is preventable, whether it be, signs and indicators way beforehand. I mean, we see a lot with these different, murderers, that they do have these signs, these symptoms of, whether it be a mental health struggle or something along those lines, that shows that maybe they do want to commit some acts of, some atrocious acts of violence against whatever demographic they want to commit hate against. It doesn't matter, but I think a lot of it could be prevented in that regard. The other preventable, which we've already talked about a little bit here also, is hardening our soft targets, which are our schools. I think, like I said, I think we kind of already hit all of that, but if you guys wanted to elaborate a little bit more, how does your vision for guns fit into that picture of future America? I'll let anybody just take that.
If I may, you'll never hear me say that guns don't have a place in our society. Obviously, my stance is very clear. And again, I'm not going to apologize for that. Again, not to beat a dead horse, man, but it's a tool. And it's the only equalizer when evil shows its face holding a firearm. It is the only equalizer, right? But like you were saying, man, we need to do a better job at hardening the target, right? I see too many schools, and I'm going to call out Cleveland Elementary, the scene of one of the very first mass school shootings of its kind in our country. This happened in 1989. It's a long time ago. And it's only within the last 10 years that they put up a big wrought iron gate in front of the school. You used to be able to just walk by the campus and walk right up to the windows of a lot of these classrooms. And it makes me cringe, right? People say, oh, so you want to harden our schools and make it look like a prison. No, but have you ever been to the White House? Have you ever been, can you climb the fence? Sure. You're not going to get very far, right? And the White House is a beautiful example of, layered concentric security measures that they take. Is a fence going to stop somebody? No, but it's a layer, right? And you talk about school safety and campus-based safety. It's a layer. So you put in the gates up, you're funneling access. I've always said the front office of a school should be where any visitor has to go through, and the lobby of a front office should look like a bank. Can we walk into most banks right now and get behind the counter? It's going to take some work, but it's going to take a lot of time and effort, right? And we don't invest enough in our schools, right? You can make it look pretty. It doesn't have to look like a prison, but having the roaming patrols, having the stationary, guards, having, staff that is trained in lockdown procedures. And I do that a lot. I've worked as a consultant now for a few years and specialize in teaching people how to adequately lock down their workspace, right? Whether they're a teacher or they work in a front office, it has nothing to do with firearms. That's just a step. That's just a layer, right? And you'd be surprised at people, that have never even practiced getting their door locked under stress or getting the light turned off and making it look like nobody's home, right? We've never had an active shooter breach a solid core door out of the hundreds of cases that I've looked at. Why? Because it's a hard target, and then you talk about cover and concealment and you explain that to the staff that are in your trainings. And it's like, it starts to click. And it's not just one thing. It's a culmination of a lot of different things that need to happen to make it harder for these individuals who choose to do harm.
Rob, I'll add on to what you just said. Once you get all that in place, then you got to practice a whole training aspect. Run red teams. There should be 2 or 3 red teams around a year. Don't tell them what is happening, and try to match the school.
Exactly.
And then write the threat assessment report on that and learn from that. Like that's the way we keep it in play. And I don't know why every school, college, Major League Baseball does it. All these big businesses do it. Why are our schools not doing it?
Right.
Don't know why that's not happening.
Yeah, and it was after the Tennessee shooting of the reserve or the recruiting office, and then the Navy, the NOSC, which was really similar to where I was going for drill down in Greenville, South Carolina. We started running those drills just like that, where we'd have like a, active shooter on scene. But being a bunch of Marines who weren't supposed to be carrying guns, they would have to give us a heads up beforehand that, hey, you shouldn't have a firearm on you. We're giving you this opportunity to go to your vehicle to for any personal reason, something along those lines, because something may or may not go down here in just a few minutes. That is a drill. So, it's something like that. But even still, they would still run in and somebody would have blanks and they're shooting up our drill center, I was a fatality, actually. I didn't have a chance, man. He came around the corner, saw him, and next thing you know, I'm looking down the barrel of an M16, and that, was one of ours. And I was like, oh, how about that? Done. So we had those drills, and then it was mostly a run, hide, fight kind of thing. That's all they taught. Even for us in the Marines, they're just like, we'd have one guy that's usually the armorer that's actually walking around with a pistol. And that's it. We're not allowed to have firearms within our drill center. Not allowed to have firearms on base, that kind of stuff, So it's like, but, hey, at least trying to get in is a little bit more difficult, but that's not going to prevent somebody from that's running the gate at the end of the day or coming in to a softer version of a chain link fence, come on.
Well, I teach improvised weapons, and it's like, okay, you don't have access to a firearm at work. Okay, what else do you have, right? And it's about preparedness over paranoia. I can't get that through enough to their heads. It's like, come on, and training is empowering, and it's awesome to me to be able to put on these types of trainings and see the light bulb go off in their heads and going, okay, you talk about run, hide, fight. Well, the human body, when they're addressing something that's scary, they have a fight, flight, or freeze mentality. It happens to all of us. Well, how do you get over the freeze portion? You train. It's muscle memory. So working them through the problem, and I tell people, like I used to tell the cops that work for me, it's like, dude, if you get in a situation, you get hurt, you're not dead. You're not dead until you're dead, right? I don't want to hear say, oh, I'm dead. No, dude, you're not dead. You're fighting through this. And everything that we teach and I teach, it's like, I'm not telling you you're not going to get shot. I'm just saying I'd rather die on my feet than die, cowering under some desk. You can't fight from under a desk, so get prepared to fight and changing that mindset, that warrior mindset of like, no, you have options. You're always going to have options, and running might turn into hiding might turn into fighting might turn back into hiding, but work through your problems, think through your problem, and don't stop.
Yeah. That reminds me a little bit of, if I'm recalling this correctly, the Virginia Tech shooting many years ago, where that guy was lining people up like on their knees, shooting, stopped to reload, and nobody
attacked him.
Nobody attacked him, and it's like, yo, wait a minute now. Granted, again, this is where fear can paralyze you.
Yes.
Where where even your mind starts playing tricks on you, like, oh, maybe he ran out, maybe he stopped, maybe he's just done now, and then all of a sudden you start hearing the shots again. Well, now I'm too afraid to move again, right? And it's like that. Just that moment of thought just screwed an opportunity for you, perhaps. Granted, having not been in that situation, having not been there, and I don't want to speak ill of anybody that that lost their lives in that situation. Like, well, if they would have just did this, they could still be alive. Like, I don't know that. I don't know that one.
8 armchair quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I don't. That's not what I want to be. But hearing that this guy stopped to reload while executing people, and my thought was, but nobody chose to try to attack at that moment. It just seems crazy to me.
That also goes with knowledge and training, also understanding what a reload is. Some people don't know what a reload is, but after a certain amount of rounds, there's going to be a lull in the gunfight. That all comes with training. All right, I heard 10, 15, 20. Okay, shit, maybe he has 5 or 10 more shots left. Maybe this is our chance to jump on him, whatever it may be. I mean, all those pieces get put together, like Rob was saying.
Right.
Teaching people how to introduce a malfunction, and learning the operations of a firearm, and and I love getting guys out on the range and going, okay, put your hand over the ejection port on that Glock, point it down range, stay safe, now pull the trigger. It's going to shoot once, but what just happened? Now you just introduced a double feed, and a failure to eject. Okay, does that buy you time? Now, what are your options? What can you do? Can you strike? Can you get the gun away? Can you tap, rack, and reload? It's like, dude, just work through your problem. Just don't freeze.
Yeah. Right.
So to answer the question, it's like, it's like we need to train. We need to prepare. I talk about situational awareness, with my kids. I have school-age kids too, and there was a time we drove out to the beach. We live here in California. We're 2 hours from the coast. And we were coming back in the middle of the night. And I'm in my truck, and I got 4 teenagers in my car. My wife's asleep, and I'm driving down some country road, and I'm trying to stay awake. Got music going a little bit, and I look back, and I was like, okay, we're out in the middle of nowhere, out in Hollister, bunch of onion fields and garlic fields and stuff. And I hit the brakes, and I go, okay, pop quiz, everybody. And they're looking at me, what the heck? We're the only car on the road. And I go, all right, dad just had a heart attack or whatever. And, I'm unconscious. I hit a pole. Where are we? And I made my kids work through that problem. How are you going to give me help? Well, I'm going to call 911. Okay. What if you don't have cell phone reception? Did we just pass another house a quarter mile back? Did we, maybe you do get a cell phone reception and you can call 911. Where are we? Is there a telephone pole over there with numbers on it? Can you give that to the dispatcher? Again, don't freeze, right? Work through your problem. Am I teaching my kids how to be paranoid? No, I want them being prepared in case I ever need help and they got to get me or somebody else, that help. It's so important. So that's the world that I want people to live in. Mm-hmm. Preparedness.
Preparedness over paranoia. I love that, actually. Yeah.
I want my children to have the same world that I grew up in. However, that's not going to happen. But yes, if they can be more prepared and maybe we can return a semblance of security. Again, Ronald Reagan said it best when he said, freedom is no more than one generation away from extinction, must be fought for and protected and handed down for the next generation to do the same. So that's the ultimate goal, is to hand down the freedom to our children. And right along with it, the Second Amendment along with that, because you talked about hardening the schools and the solid core doors, and that's great. And I remember when Pennsylvania, one of the schools started putting 5-gallon buckets of river stones in their classrooms. And I remember here in San Antonio, Texas, they heard about that and they were laughing about it on the radio. And I called in the radio station. I said, you guys stop laughing about that. Because if a shooter comes breaking into a room and all these teenage kids are throwing river stones at it, that is a deterrent. And now put a gun in the hands of the teacher that it's not getting river stones thrown in that teacher's face. Who do you think's going to win that gun battle?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These are ideas and things that can improve on the security of the school. And don't laugh at river stones. That's a heck of a deterrent, especially some kid in that classroom that's a all-star pitcher for the baseball team, zinging a river stone pretty hard. That could be a serious deterrent. And I'm not saying.
Let's face it. The gunmen, they're banking on fear. And I'm sorry to interrupt, Steve, but people are banking on fear when they want to inflict harm. And if they enter into an occupied space, they're probably not going to be prepared for, mentally for a fight back, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you got people chucking stones and hitting them over the head with, a fire extinguisher, whatever it is, an improvised weapon, it's probably going to knock them off their little OODA loop and go, okay,
And this may be an interesting time to bring up that picture that I sent you, Clint.
Oh, yeah, sure. I can go ahead and bring that up really quick.
About this personally, because this really matters. So I knew that I was going to do this interview, and I went by the closest school to myself. As a matter of fact, here in Texas, we have the school guardian program. And if you'll read the sign, and it's in Spanish and in English, staff at Lavernia ISD are legally armed and trained. We will use whatever force necessary to protect our students. And that same thing is underneath it in Spanish, and I don't read Spanish. And And the interesting part in Texas now, the school board has to pass the Guardian program, the school marshal program. The school board has to take part in that. Okay. Well, it's available in Texas. And Robb Elementary School and Uvalde chose not to take part of the Guardian program. And just to point this out, that one of the teachers in the room that was murdered by the killer in Robb Elementary School was a police officer's wife.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that police officer's wife would have taken part in the school Guardian program if that had been allowed her. I would say yes, it would. This is part of what Texas is doing to prevent it. Now, we can't force Robb Elementary to take part in this. It has to pass by the school board. It has to be enacted by the school board. I would say that it should be a mandatory thing that all the schools participate in this. And again, these signs don't cost much money. And the funny thing about it is not one mass shooting in the state of Texas at a school has ever happened at one of these schools that put these signs up. That in itself is a deterrent because not even the students know which teachers are carrying. And the teachers have to go through a psychological test to make sure that they are able and willing to use a firearm if needed to be. And again, like I say, they train with law enforcement during the summer months.
No, that's pretty interesting. Yeah. Sounds like a pretty solid program, honestly.
Yeah, in California, we have signs that say this is a gun-free zone, and sorry, it's true.
Yeah.
What a difference between California and Texas. Look at that sign. Look at that sign, and that sign is huge, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That sign is as big as my car is.
It's psychologically. You're stopping them psychologically. You have slapped them in the face and made them stop for a second.
Yeah.
And you haven't even gotten to the violence.
To at school and say, there's another school down the road. I'll go there.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's something that does happen a lot of times. We've seen it multiple times, even with this last one that happened again in Minneapolis. I saw somewhere stated, again, looking for easier targets, 94% gun-free zones are usually the grounds for these types of actions and this type of violence. So,
well, didn't the shooter in Nashville, she bypassed a couple different campuses. Yeah. She did research and she bypassed a couple of hardened targets to get into the school that she was at.
In Sutherland Springs, Texas, the mass shooter that came in there, Lavernia, the town just up the road from us. Lavernia, that mass shooter went into the First Baptist Church in Lavernia, Texas first. And there were 2 uniformed police officers that were going on duty after church services were over. So they were in their uniforms with their guns. He walked in, sat on the back pew, and decided to come to Sutherland Springs.
Yeah.
Major deterrents. Why
did he choose Sutherland Springs over Lavernia, where he went in first?
I'm assuming you probably saw some guards or something.
Yes.
Or a sign.
He saw 2 uniformed
cops
ready on duty, and the coward decided somebody else with a gun is there. I'm going somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
Current.
Yeah, it like I said, gun-free zones are more dangerous than your guns actually are.
Right.
Aaron, I know you got to hop off here in just a minute, man, and we still got plenty of questions to get through also, but I'd love to get some of your, parting wisdom, if you will, before you hop off.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for having me on. Clint, do me a favor, connect me with Steven and Rob. I'd love to have some conversation afterwards. especially
For
Rob,
sure.
since he was right down the street from me where I was
Yeah, I
working.
got
Yeah,
you,
man.
of course.
Are you still in Cali?
No, I retired and moved to Florida. I came back to the East Coast. I got out of
Good
that.
for you, man.
But I just have to go back to what I was saying before. I think the solution to a lot of this is we need to protect our most precious assets in this world as our kids. The way we treat our piece of paper money and these banks, and we have everything else protected so heavily. We need to treat them with that plus more. Um,
Mhm.
we should have, like I said, some sort of quick reaction force type squad that is either at each individual school, church, whatever it may be, or having rove, rovering type of unit that has either certain zones that they cover, whatever it may be, that is their job, you know. But I think with something like that, that people are stationed in front of schools or at the entry or ingress egress points of schools, and they see something, that's what their job will be, sitting there looking for these type of threats and engage with those threats if they see them. No ifs, ands, maybes about them. Take care of that threat. You see a guy walking with a rifle, it's over. The conversation has ended in the parking lot. You know, any questions, you have to contact anybody, detain, whatever it may be. But that is your job. That is solely your job. Not to say hi, bye, or anything. Make sure no threats get to that school, and God forbid they do, go take care of them.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, God bless the school with SROs, but what do they do with a lot of the SROs, Rob? You know that your rifle's locked up in your car. It's in a safe in a room. You're not getting to where you need to be for a minute or two. And a minute or two, like I said, a sophisticated threat in any sort of room. That's it, man. The party's over by the time you even get there. So
Yeah, that's why I like, this fold AR. They make such a
Yep.
cool product. The gun actually folds up, fits in a backpack, so it's doesn't look, if anybody's afraid of optics, not the optic that sits on your gun, but as far as just how things look, a cop walking around with an AR-15 or an armed guard, just might look menacing in a school. It's like, well, he can have the capabilities of an AR right in his backpack. That folds out and is deployed in a matter of seconds and can get shots on target that at least balances the playing field if somebody comes in with an equal type of firearm.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
I agree with what you're saying, but I think I lean towards more what Steven said. I want that deterrent. I want them to walk into that school and see 2 tac vests and 2 slung rifles.
Sure, I
And
get
say,
that.
you know what? I'm not going there today. I don't really want to do it that bad.
Yeah.
You're talking about optics too. I think possibly we need to make it mainstream and understood. We need to have people that, like you said, Aaron, that they see it, and now it's mainstream, and it doesn't worry them. Just like when we were children, our parents always taught us, if you ever get lost, find a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
How do you designate a police officer? Well, the uniform, the gun on his side and stuff. He's who you go to ask for help. And it's optics. It's being able to bring that into mainstream. No, we don't want our schools to look like a prison, yet we want our schools to look like a safe place.
Yeah.
And what creates a safe place is good men and women with guns that the children can depend on.
Yeah. I mean, even at the airport, I see guys walking around with SIGs, Daniel Defense rifles all the time.
Yeah.
Armed, they're kitted out, and even still you'll see somebody crazy, acting up, but I don't really ever hear of death at airports, you know. So yeah, just other things to consider, man. Aaron, I don't know if you got more time with us or not.
Yeah,
If you do,
I've got to run,
Yeah.
gentlemen. I appreciate the time. I would love to do this again, talk some more. Definitely share my information. Look forward to talking to you guys some more, Clint. We'll talk offline too.
Yeah, you got it, man. Well, I'll have you on a live stream soon.
Yes, sir. All right, gentlemen. Thank you.
Take it easy,
All right, bro.
bro.
All right, you guys be safe.
2.
So one of the other things that's kind of often talked about and wrong is, we're going to get into some clarifying questions now, is assault weapons and assault rifles, assault style rifles, what the AR-15 actually is and things like that. And I know these are pretty simple questions for guys like us to answer, but I think it's really important that, look, we need to have this conversation because even still we're seeing it, described so incorrectly, all these different things that I just said. So first and foremost, I think we can all agree here that assault weapons, they don't really exist. These aren't things that actually exist. You can assault anybody with anything at the end of the day. Again, here's one of my pocket knives, I can try to assault with a deadly weapon at the end of the day that you can, wherever my camera is right now, you can do that. I've also got this candle right here that's got some weight behind it that I could, just like the rocks that we're talking about, we could cause some serious damage with just any inanimate object at the end of the day.
What about earlier?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, and so if anybody asks, and I think this is a great opportunity for each of us to kind of explain in our own way our definitions of these. Well, there's not even our definition. What the definition is of, like, per se, an assault rifle, because somebody else asked, about what is high powered. What is that considered, right? Because we hear all the time that the AR-15 is this high powered rifle, and I beg to differ. Actually, I think it's kind of I guess I could consider it the standard when it comes to power at the end of the day. But I look at something like, your battle rifle, your FALs, your M1 Garands. I consider those to be a little bit more high power, but even still, I go further and I'm like, well, what about 408 Chi-Tac? What about 50 cal? I consider those to be even higher powered, right? So when somebody says high powered, again, it's just another trigger term, another word to be able to be like, oh, we don't need these high powered weapons of war on the street. And it's just like, well, hold on. Because my AR-15s have never served in war. So that's kind of an interesting take. That might look like the guns that are similar to, but they haven't. So there's that. So, I know the answer to these questions, but I'm going to let you guys do some talking. Rob, what does AR and AR-15 stand for?
Armor light rifle, man. It's the designer of the design. It's the original name of the design. The person who actually came up with that platform. It's not assault rifle. That's not what AR stands for. And people, I hear it so often on news media. They use these terms, and it's supposed to be scary. It's supposed to inflict this, this reaction in people, and I just shake my head. I was part of that whole Gunmageddon in Sacramento years back, and when the Kevin DeLeon, he was one of our lawmakers, and he's holding them. This is a ghost gun, and it shoots a 30 caliber clip, and he's spewing out all these numbers that just, I was like, no, that's not what happens, and that's not what, you have no idea what you're talking about. Or the one that always gets me is we talked about semi-auto versus full auto. Well, I've heard the term a fully semi-auto.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I've had to explain that to people, and we know why they're using these terms. Sometimes the people that are actually giving the interviews and putting the information out there have no knowledge. They really don't. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so it's extremely important. But yeah, I mean, the AR-15 has been demonized so often. People are shocked that, when they come to me and they ask these questions, and then I show them what a 5.56 round looks like, or a 223 versus a 22 caliber. I'm like, look, the bullet itself that's sitting in the shell, it's exactly the same caliber. It's the same diameter. It's just, this one has more powder charge. It's not necessarily high powered, has a lot more powder behind it, but but it's the same bullet, and then we start talking about ballistics and everything else. But yeah, I mean, we have people that are getting on camera and they're talking about, this gun, it explodes when it hits you and it blows off limbs, and no, it doesn't. No.
Yeah, I mean, even again, when you said you're a six, and you got hit by a 7.62 by 39, which is a significantly larger projectile than a 2.23 or 5.56. Even in my mind, having experience with these guns, I'm thinking, how is your foot still attached, and
Yeah.
how did you survive even a ricochet and fragmentation from 7.62? Which again, same projectile size as like 308, which is another very common round in this country, and actually my personal favorite round.
Yeah.
And that is higher power than a 5.56 2.23 cartridge that the AR-15 typically shoots. Granted, the AR-15 is such a versatile platform of a firearm. Again, we know this, but to many that might be watching don't know, it has the capabilities of shooting a wide variety of different calibers. Now, granted, the standard AR-15 is 5.56 to 2.23. You have AR-9s that are chambered in 9mm, which is the most popular pistol cartridge out there. You've got 45 10mm. You've got 300 Blackout, which is also a 7.62 projectile. So the list goes on. You can even get up to 50 Beowulf, which is a version of 50 caliber, right? And again, it just keeps on going and going and going. You even have a 7.62 by 39 ARs. I mean, for anybody that thinks that it's just a high-powered gun, well, it really depends on what it's shooting at the end of the day, like the AR-10 being chambered in 308. Go ahead, Stephen.
Understand most states usually ban 5.56 or 2.23 from hunting because it is inadequate at taking the animal that you want. There's a lot of states that ban the use of them because they are inadequate for a hunting round. Now, I use mine in the state of Texas. They let us, but you have to have a good shot placement to take an animal with it. So, AR-15s, high powered. It's ridiculous. I even talked about one time that the Browning 9mm Browning high power, they called it a high power pistol.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so hilarious that they called a pistol a high power, and if somebody that doesn't know anything, they'd say, "Oh, it's a high power. It must be a military grade pistol." Remember Sheila Jackson Lee, former Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, that said, "I held an AR-15 once.
It's heavy. Yeah,
10 boxes that someone
moving boxes."
And it carried a 50 caliber bullet, which when I hear these politicians, these people that know so little about what they're speaking of, need to keep their mouths shut because they have no.
Yeah, and it's, again, that's the biggest takeaway from this, is that we just really want to spread, factual and correct information, not these misconceptions and everything else that we hear. One of my favorite is, of course, the assault rifle claim, because assault rifles, and even in the firearms world and in this community, which, by the way, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I was able to change like my screen orientation. So now it looks like I'm actually looking at you guys to my right. That's kind of cool. So if you guys are watching and you notice that happen, sorry, I was just playing with that because I was like, dude, I'm always looking to the left. I thought it looked weird, but anyway, just goes to show I'm a goofy kind of guy like that.
I can get a high five.
Yeah. But you got to go the other way. Wait. Yeah, you got to go. All right, now we're getting off topic here. But the way assault rifle is so wrongfully used, like I said, even in our community, it's laughable when somebody says assault rifles don't exist, and it's coming from somebody that claims to be well versed in firearms, because it's like, well, actually they do. It started in technically 1944 with the Sturmgewehr that the Germans ultimately designed, which directly translates to assault rifle. But assault rifles today do exist, and the definition is it is a rifle shooting an intermediate cartridge, which would equivalent to 5.56, 7.62 by 39, something along those lines, 2.23, even an intermediate cartridge. Intermediate doesn't directly translate to high-powered in my mind, but an intermediate cartridge chambered rifle with a removable magazine that is select fire in nature. Select fire, of course, meaning that it is not just semi-auto, which, as we've already discussed, is one shot per trigger pull, but multiple shots per trigger pull. And that is an assault rifle. Those do exist, and I wish I owned them. They are a lot of fun, but at the end of it all, the AR-15, as we all know here, is not an assault rifle. People can successfully and legally just lost my train of thought, but people can ultimately, what is the word I'm looking for right now?
Transfer?
Not exactly transfer, but they can convert. Thank you. Goodness gracious.
Oh, convert.
My own brain just gave out on me. But people can lawfully convert their firearm to shoot full auto after they go through the proper, channels of becoming a manufacturer and then receiving the okay from the federal government, paying the taxes to do so. Then you can drill that third hole, as we all like to call it, and drop in a full auto trigger pack or trigger group, trigger, fire control unit, whatever it might be for the type of firearm that you're building. And you can actually legally build full auto guns. Machine guns are not outlawed in this country. They're just higher regulated. And so, same thing with like silencers and things like that. And of course, a lot of people will say, okay, well, we don't see a lot of silencers being used in crime. We don't see a lot of machine guns being used in crime, which Glock switches are pretty prevalent in Chicago, I hear. But, so somebody says, well, why don't we take that same type of regulation that we have on these machine guns, that we have on destructive devices such as explosives and things like that, and silencers, and apply that just to everyday firearms, because we see that making it more difficult to obtain means that they won't be used as much in crime. What are y'all's response to that?
Well, they're going to use. Criminals are going to get guns, and they don't go through the stamp fee or anything else. They get guns off the streets. They buy guns wherever they can find guns in the black market, things like that. They're not worried about laws. And if you're talking about doing stamp tax. I'm sorry. So when they initiated the stamp tax and stuff back in 1934, the stamp tax was the cost of a Thompson 45 machine gun, and which today would be about almost $5,000.
Yeah.
And what that does is it makes wealthy people the only ones that can own guns.
Yeah.
And let's get back to the root of why we have the Second Amendment altogether. It's to prevent a tyrannical government.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want only the rich people to be able to own guns. You want the populace to be able to own guns. And say what you will, human nature never changes. All the way back from the Russian Revolution, which most people don't know, more people were murdered in the Russian Revolution than in Nazi Germany. And they went around and they collected all the guns before the Russian Revolution started. And then what did they do when the government got all the guns? And they started ethnic cleansing and killing the people that, that could not fight back anymore. And Nazi Germany did the same thing. They enacted gun control. They collected all the guns, and then they started murdering Jewish people and gays and undesirables, who they chose to be undesirable.
Yeah.
And Mao Zedong did the same thing. And then all the way, and they said, oh, well, today's different. Today's different. No, human nature never changes. Anyone that ever has that much power, power goes to them. And if there is no way of any kind of resistance, look at Venezuela, where they took up all the guns and then they ran over people with tanks.
Mm-hmm.
still happens. It still happens today. And if this nation ever loses its right to own guns, and however they think that they can pick up all the guns, then it'll happen here also. The difference is we have so many guns out there, they're going to have a hard time getting all the guns, and people like me that won't give them up, no matter what their law is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
I think Hollywood has sensationalized, a lot of the tools that we're talking about. You're talking about silencers, right? Mm-hmm. So I've shot suppressed weapons. It doesn't make them silent. It doesn't make the gun any more deadly. It actually just protects the user, and there's a time and a place, obviously in combat, where you don't want to create a bunch of noise. It does prohibit the gun from being as loud, but it's not quiet, and it's not like the movies that, you pull the trigger and it's just you hear a click, I mean, there are some platforms that do.
Yeah, I think my favorite's in John Wick 2, where, Keanu and Common are shooting at each other with their suppressed pistols and the mall or whatever. You're like, dude,
yes,
that one that one drives me crazy. Not at all. And coming from a guy here, I'm going to just kind of show the audience really quick. You're the main, I put you in the main spotlight there, but just kind of showing, I mean, I've got, suppressor right here. Where's all my other ones? I guess they're on different guns that I've taken to the range recently, but another one right behind me, here, having owned, several myself, I can tell you that they can get pretty quiet. They have the ability to get pretty quiet, depending on a lot of different circumstances. Again, we're talking barrel length, we're talking super versus subsonic projectiles. We're talking, even the length of the silencer will have a lot to do with it. So it does not, at the end of the day, completely suppress the firearm. However, what it does a good job doing, and why the Marines are so silencer happy right now, and why we're adopting so many, I say we, but August 25th was my last day in the Marines, and as we're recording here on September 1st, I still have it in my head that I'm in the Marines. All right, so
you're still a Marine,
but yeah, once and always, right? Right, but that's why the Marines.
One question while we're talking about the Marines.
Yeah.
So can you tell the difference in flavors of crayon?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Purple's my absolute favorite, actually. Yeah. But when it comes to silencers, and why the Marines are all about it, is because when you get into combat, you experience what's called this fog of war. And it's everything from sounds that are deafening to... if you've watched the movie Warfare, it does a great job at just depicting that exact thing. If you're on comms, you've got radio that's just constantly being blown in your ear. You've got your teammates that are constantly yelling. You've got gunshots that are coming in and out. Dust is flying up from explosions and everything else around you. Yelling, screaming, as you can imagine, it creates this brain fog. It creates just chaos. And one thing that we're learning is if we don't have the report as bad from our own firearm when we're shooting, and from our own teammates around us, it might be a little bit easier to communicate. It might reduce a little bit of that fog of war, if possible, while also suppressing, and here's a big takeaway, muzzle flash. And that's a big thing, so that way enemy combatants can't easily identify where somebody might be shooting from because they're seeing a muzzle flash or something like that, right? Now, granted, a lot of muzzle devices that are on AR-15s, things like that, they don't create this big fireball effect that you often see in Hollywood, but they can still put off a signature that would be easy enough to have the area in which somebody might be shooting that you could direct fire. Suppressor, a silencer, as its lawful name, does a great job at suppressing the sound and suppressing that flash. Some do better than others. But again, there's a lot of different nuances there, but at the end of it all, silencers, I've owned plenty, still have plenty. I like shooting with them. I typically actually don't shoot without them anymore because, for one, even with hearing protection on, I will still sometimes use a silencer, but I've got, now enough tinnitus to go around, and I'd rather not add to that. So, that's another big thing that I think silencers are a a great thing to own. And as we found in Europe also, it's gentlemanly and unbecoming to hunt without a silencer. So it's like you could scare off the game from another hunter's land or something like that. So use a silencer. It's the gentleman's way to shoot.
But you would never go and say that it makes your gun like more deadly, right? It doesn't give your gun a supernatural power or ability, right? It doesn't change the velocity,
It could do a minor shift in velocity. It could go both ways.
Right.
Though. It could go both ways. You could get a little uptick. You could also get a little less. It really, again, it depends on so many different things. In fact, I think that's a really good video idea about silencers' impact on different types of calibers and also different firearms. But also you can, by adding that weight at the end of the barrel, have a slight point of impact shift as well. So when you shoot without the silencer, add the silencer, now where your bullet is actually traveling could differ. Again, it depends on everything, but you could be, let's say, 6 inches off your target, right? Again, that's all just, not exact, but I'm just saying, so these are different things. Stephen, you're about to say something.
Well, I've been using my suppressor. I'm shooting a 4570 with a subsonic 410 grain bullet.
Yeah.
I'm hunting hogs at night. And people make fun of me because my hog feeder, I bait them with corn because they're a menace.
Yeah.
It is 78 yards from my back porch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when I shoot a hog. And my wife is in bed sleeping. And with my suppressor, it suppresses the sound well enough that it does not wake her up, and she really appreciates that.
Yeah, which makes so much sense, and also kind of gets us into our next question too, because we've talked so much about different calibers and things like that. One of the questions we got was, how do calibers differ for things like hunting, home defense, or sport shooting? Why choose one over the other? And we already talked about the 5.56 223 cartridge in many states is actually unlawful to hunt with. And that's why, again, shot placement, point of impact, things like that are so critical when it comes to shooting, to make sure that you get that desired effect on target, whatever that might be. And, so for things like hunting, something obviously you don't want something so large that it's just going to absolutely destroy the game. But at the same time, I think, for the purpose that you're doing, which is pest control, especially on boar, which if anybody has seen what a boar can take, a 5.56 would just kind of piss it off at the end of the day. But a 4570, trying to see if I had one just laying here by chance. I don't, but just so people can kind of see, here's a, 5.56 cartridge. If I can get that to focus, and then here's like a 308 that we've been talking a little bit about. So you can see that there's an obvious size difference between the two. And I don't have a 7.62 or a like you said, a 4570 right here in front of me, unfortunately, but just so other people have a visualization as to the difference of the two different types.
Well, I'm doing pest control. The 4570 will actually, if I can line up 2 hogs, I can take them both.
So, I mean, that's one way to save money, because 4570 ain't cheap. But people need to understand too that this,
suppressed or not, they're going to run.
Yeah,
they're going to run. It's going to be almost impossible to get a second shot at another hog. So the best thing to do if you're into pest control, and that's what hogs are, is they are horrible. They damage everything, and they will eat my fawns. They will eat deer and things. So it is pest control. So if I can take two with one shot, I'm twice as good.
Yeah, and I think people need to understand too, and because that's one of the biggest things I get is like, well, why would you need something like, that Mark 18 behind me on the wall for home defense or something like that? 4570, I think, is a capable round. It's going to do a good job. But but it's really just comes down to different calibers for different applications. And I want, at the end of the day, the tool that I think is going to do the best work and give me that advantage. Especially, yeah. What's that?
And not over penetrate.
Yeah. Especially in a home defense application, right?
And 45, 410 grain slugs through your house.
No, I don't want that. But additionally, in case I need to get that follow-up shot or anything, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do that with, a lever gun, a bolt action, or something like that. So just for the audience's sake, so we can kind of see a little bit more, my home defense gun that, I've got, again, my Mark 18, my Shorty 5.56 gun, but what I think would be preferred is something like 300 Blackout. What I've got in my PDW over here from Daniel, and this is a 300 Blackout cartridge. So again, you've got a 7.62, cover up my face again so the camera doesn't focus on that, 7.62 projectile and pretty much a 5.56 case, this being the projectile, this being the cartridge case. If we compare that to 5.56, you can see the difference there, just a larger bullet at the end of the day. And with that, it's a much slower round, especially if you're shooting subsonics. I still use supers for home defense and things like that personally. And there's reasons behind that as well. But at the end of it all, it really comes down to having the availability and the option to be able to choose what I'm going to deem necessary to defend myself and my loved ones. Yeah. And I don't want to compromise on that. I'm sorry, I don't. I think a 9mm pistol is a great deterrent at the end of the day. I think it's great for everyday carry because I can conceal it. As I mentioned at the beginning of this stream, I can't easily conceal my PDW or my Mark 18 on the wall there. I can't really stuff that in my pants and walk around all that comfortably, but I can take one of my concealed carry holsters and tuck that into my pants with my pistol that I train with often and carry that. But if I had the ability to be able to conceal carry something that's got higher capability, then I would definitely choose that. And like I said, I don't want to make that compromise. So when somebody says, why do you need that for home defense? Well, maybe I don't need it for home defense, but I'm going to use it because I want, again, what's going to be the most capable tool for the job. And that's all there is to it, and thankfully we live in a country that says you can do that.
I would like to address it because the fact is, as you said, you may not need it. However, I never expected to be confronting a man with Class 3 body armor and ballistic bulletproof helmet. And with a pistol, with just a pistol, that would have been a very bad experience. And I know the 5.56 did not penetrate the body armor. However, the rifle was much easier to get good shots on him with him moving and shooting at me. So I don't want anybody trying to tell me what I need to defend myself with, especially after what I've been through. It's none of their business. David Hogg, by the way, said I was a coward because I used an AR-15 and he could have done the same thing with his Glock.
All right, so
I want to say if you're
trying to do a challenge,
if you're in a fair fight, your tactics suck.
Right. Yeah. So, I don't know if this would ever make it to him or not, but I would actually encourage David to come on and actually speak with us, about this stuff. Yeah. And if he doesn't want to feel outnumbered, he can bring a couple of his friends too that might have similar points of view to him, because again, I want this to be an open dialogue and an invitation. I don't want anybody to feel as if they're being, made fun of, things like that. We might make light of, especially politicians and journalists that might use assault weapon instead of AR-15 or, we've seen like the high point carbine be used, things like that, which is definitely not an assault rifle by any means, and neither is the AR-15 or anything else. So I don't want anybody to feel singled out or anything like that. But if you're going to say something like that, David Hogg, I would encourage you, for one, try to do exactly what you just said. Try to actually, on a stationary target, engage only face and pretty much where the belly button might be, because that's and just try from what was the distance you were at, Stephen, when you were taking these shots?
It was 20 yards.
So at 20 yards,
It wasn't
try that.
again.
Yeah.
He was shooting at me,
Yeah.
and it's moving.
Right.
And
And
just for reference,
I know, and I just want David to try it without being shot at, and then naturally, and then of course also with a stationary target. Just try that under no duress whatsoever. Just the fact that you have to get shots on target and your point of impact and shot placement matters. And then imagine taking rounds while engaging a threat that's also moving. That's, I mean, I shoot a lot, don't get me wrong. And trying to do that with a rifle alone, I already know that I'd be questioning my ability to be able to do such a thing.
Hitting 6 out of 6 rounds.
And again, I feel like I would also make contact with the guy, but that would be after shooting 20 to 30 rounds. It would be accuracy through volume. I don't think I might underestimate myself. I often hope that's the case, is that I honestly underestimate myself, because if I overestimate, then that's a bad day. But I always want to, like I said, always be the student, always push myself further. So that way, if I ever find myself in that situation, again, not being paranoid, but being prepared, I can rise to the occasion. Or at least, again, I can only hope that I would have the wherewithal, the mentality, and everything else to be able to do that.
The thing in the back of my head the whole time was, if I miss him, there's a possibility of my round going through the church and hitting somebody that I cared about.
Yeah.
And I was able to hit him 6 out of 6 rounds fired on him.
And you only had 8 rounds in your mag, right?
I only had 8 rounds in my magazine.
I remember that, and because keep in mind, he had a 30-round magazine, except he didn't have his magazine loaded when all this first broke out, so he just grabbed a handful of rounds, stuffed 8 rounds in that mag before he started engaging the threat. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I had a box full of ammunition there, but I couldn't take time to load 30 rounds into a magazine. I had to get into the fight as fast. Like I say, I even left the shoes at the house, because when you're hearing all those rounds going off and know that they're aimed at someone you care about, you don't have time.
Yeah, and it's actually because of that story, Stephen, is why I at least have one magazine that I keep loaded of different calibers. So that way, if it's my 5.56 gun that's close by, I've got at least a mag ready to go. My home defense, like
all over my wall.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. Again, it's just preparedness, especially now being a parent. I love my kids so much. I want to be prepared. I want to be, more than just capable. I want to be, there's that entire logic of, like, you walk into a room and your goal at the end of the day is to be the most deadliest man in the room, right? And I think that a lot of people, again, might call that paranoia, call it what you will. I'm going to call it survival. And that's something I think, just needs, I think a lot more people need to have that mindset at the end of the day, because evil exists.
That's another saying recently that I now use as kind of one of my favorite sayings. I have a few of them. And one of my favorite sayings, if you're not capable of extreme violence, you're not peaceful, you're harmless.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Peaceful.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
I have a good friend of mine that you guys might know, Travis Haley, and we were sitting having a talk, and he looked at me, and we were talking about my story, and he's like, Rob, he goes, and I didn't understand what he was asking, but he goes, do you ever just want to be good enough? I was like, yeah, I want to be good enough. He goes, you do? Think about that. He goes, do you want to be good, just good enough? I said, no, I want to be the best that I can be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, again, I misunderstood the question at first, but I'll tell you something, it had an impact on me, because I never want to just wake up and have the mindset of just, I'm good enough. Like, I can always be better. And you said it a couple of times, Clint, like, man, be a constant student, be willing to learn and never just be good enough. I don't want to settle. Right. Especially in something that my life or the lives of my children or my wife or my friends and, or just normal citizens around me depend on. Right. I want to be the difference. I want to make the difference, like Stephen was. He was the difference in that horrific incident in Sutherland Springs, and thankfully you had the courage and the know-how to address that threat and be the difference that day. You weren't just good enough.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of like went around a couple of different discussions here, but I think it's all really good. So that way people too just see that, we're not out here just hoping for it to be the wild, wild west and everybody's carrying guns and just shooting at each other. No, we hope it to be a peaceful and respectful society at the end of the day. And you can really do that by teaching respect around something like the firearm, because it's not just a tool at the end of the day. For me, it's a way of life. It's a principle. If I'm going to carry a firearm, that means I need to carry myself in a manner that that deserves that. And what that means is I check my ego at the door. I don't get road rage. I don't do things like that could put me in a situation to where, put it this way, my number one plan is peace, is to avoid conflict. But when conflict comes and finds me and I have no other way out, that's when I want to have that tool that I can rely on that's going to get the job done. And that's all there is to it. And then part of that tool in that toolbox is my abilities and my mindset. Right. Yeah. So, which kind of brings me to this next question, which there's still a few, but I think we can save some for maybe a part 2, because we're already going at about 2.5 hours here. So what's that? Yeah. So, I mean, I mean, it's crazy too, because it's such a good conversation and I like talking with you guys. So it, doesn't feel like it's been all that long really. But there was one about what's the line between protecting the public and creating more opportunities for accidents. And I don't know, when the word accidents is used, I think about my brother, right? Because at the end of the day, that was complete negligence. And yeah, I can call it an accident, but it was negligence and ignorance. And the line between protecting the public and creating more opportunities for accidents, well, the opportunity was there. Protecting the public would have just been educating and just, for one, I do believe that firearm storage laws are an overreach. You shouldn't tell me how to store anything in my house at the end of the day, but I think as responsible gun owners and as people that want to make sure our children are safe, I like companies like Stopbox that make a very easy. I've got one in my nightstand, and that's where my bedside pistol goes. Yes, I have a bedside pistol, bedside rifle, whatever else. Don't call me crazy. It's just I found myself staring down a Bobcat the other day, and I'm glad I had my 5.56 Mark 18 and not my 9mm with me, right? So what do you want me to say? Right. But at the end of it all, I want to make sure that my kids are trained and educated when it comes to this stuff. And if I can use different tools, again, in this toolbox, to prevent anyone from getting to a firearm that I don't want to get into a firearm, then I'm going to use that. So this question between what's the line between protecting the public and creating more opportunities for accidents, Rob, I'll let you take the initiate that one.
I deal with a lot of new shooters, and the first thing I tell them is when you choose to grab a firearm, whether it's in self-defense or if it's just for CCW purposes, you are carrying an additional responsibility, and you have to be safe. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, I hear about these quote unquote accidents that happen. No, 99.9% of the time it was negligence, and it was preventable. Right? Accidents don't just happen, negligent discharges, whether it's a range accident or it's an over penetration. Like, it's so important to know what your capabilities are when you take on that responsibility of owning, using, carrying a firearm. You are no longer the same as what you were beforehand. Right? And so knowing the capabilities, I think that's the line. And then just no compromising on being unsafe. I think all of us we're all gun guys. We're all shooters. If we were to bring somebody out to a range and they just did something that was stupid that could get themselves or somebody else hurt, we'd be the first people to go, hey, dude, hold on. Right. And I've had to do that as a range safety officer, as an instructor and all that. Like, No, like there's no second chances. I've I've had guns in my house for as long as my kids can remember, right? I taught my kids at a very, very young age how to shoot because I wanted them to know what the capabilities were and what the consequences were. And when you point that muzzle at something, you better be prepared to destroy it. And even at 4 or 5 years old, my kids were shooting guns. My son, he's in the military now. He's in the Air Force. First gun he ever shot, he was 6 years old, and it was an AR-15. And he got to understand what that was. And people go, wow, you let your 6-year-old shoot an AR-15? Yeah. And he realized he's capable. And you know what? He did a very, very good job. But before I got him on the range, guess what? I was teaching him muzzle discipline. And I was explaining it to a 6-year-old, how a 6-year-old would understand it. Yeah, let's pretend you love Superman, right? Superman has that ability to have a red hot laser coming out of his eyes. And if he touches, if he looks at a piece of steel, he's going to cut right through it. Well, just pretend that there's a red hot laser coming out of that muzzle, right? And what did that teach my 6-year-old? Taught him muzzle discipline and how to turn and, address different targets without lasering somebody. And I think it's important. People have a responsibility when they choose to be gun owners and users to just be safe. I think that's the line, and just not compromising.
Yeah. Right. No, that's absolutely right. And then, Stephen, I mean, again, with your situation and everything that you experienced, I mean, the opportunity for accidents, I want to say, that's such a, I just don't like saying that, it's like,
Yeah.
The opportunities for accidents is, again, ignorance and negligence. So, just get trained up, just educate yourself. But these opportunities for evil to occur, again, we look at gun-free zones. We look at, I think society at the end of the day is what's causing a lot of these opportunities for evil to act also, because as a society, I think we've just really lost respect for one another. And I think we're starting to see a society more and more without love for one another as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's, might catch some people off guard. Like, look at these gun guys talking about love. It's like, yeah, dude, the reason I carry a gun is because I love, I love my countrymen. I love my family. I love myself, even though there were points in my life where maybe I didn't. But at the end of it all, I want to honor and be the best. I want to be an asset for those around me, not a liability. So that's why I carry and train with a firearm. It's because of love at the end of the day. So, you tell me, Stephen, I mean, what's the line between protecting the public and creating more opportunities for accidents or evil?
When you're talking about accidents, I want to point something out, because when you take the accidental gun death, the accidental, as you said, gun death, and not calling them negligent, you're calling them accidental gun deaths. Take all of those year after year after year, the accidental gun deaths are far exceeded by accidental swimming pool drownings and accidental bicycle accidents where someone dies riding a bicycle. Year after year after year, they outnumber firearms accidents. And yet, what do we do with swimming pools? We have classes that teach people how to keep from drowning in a swimming pool, how to lock the swimming pool gates. And in some cities, we even have rules where you have to lock the gate so that children can't walk over and drop in the swimming pool and drown. We teach swimming pool etiquette. Always swim with a buddy. Always do this and everything. Bicycle accidents outnumber gun accidents every year. And so we put helmets on kids, and we put, pads on kids, and we teach them in our schools how to be responsible bicycle riders, and yet year after year, there's more accidents that causes death with bicycles than there are accidents that causes death with firearms. Shouldn't we start teaching firearms training and safety precautions in schools to prevent the accidents. I told someone when I was a scoutmaster, and one of my assistant scoutmasters was very liberal and did not like firearms. I said, why don't you let me teach your children how to disarm a gun, how to drop a magazine out, how to rack the slide back and make sure there's no ammunition in it, and lock the slide back and lay it chamber side up so that everybody can see it. I can teach your children, and I will pull the firing pin out of that gun and hand it to your wife the whole time I'm working with your children. If you don't like guns, then I can disarm that gun, and I can teach your children how to be safe, because sooner or later they are going to be confronted with somebody's gun somewhere. And if they have not been trained how to make it safe, then the chances of an accident or negligence is much more likely to happen. If your kid goes over to some deputy sheriff's house and their kid says, hey, look, this is dad's gun. Oh, wait, I'm not going to touch that gun, and you shouldn't either. As a matter of fact, let me drop the magazine out, clear it, make sure it's safe. Teach children how to disarm guns, how to make sure that if the eventuality when you're going to be confronted with a gun, where you see a gun, and take the curiosity, because if they've never handled one, the curiosity is very high. Yeah. Now they've never handled it and they're really curious about it and no one's around. That can cause your accident or your negligence. And it's the same thing with swimming pools and with bicycles and with fireworks or whatever you want to, let's start training it in schools again, how to take care of, how to disarm a firearm, and how to handle it safely and properly.
Which,
and be even less accidents, if you will.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Which, brings up another question that we got. How do you envision training if more citizens are armed? Part 2 to that is, should carrying a firearm come with the same requirements as driving a car? This is one that I've gotten quite a bit, like, hey, if you're carrying a gun, you should have, just like you're driving a car, you're out in the public, you could kill somebody, so you need to get, gun insurance, which I don't think looks the same as like, USCCA or, right to bear or some of these other, firearm like carry insurance companies. But I don't know what I guess it would be. But they're talking about, I guess, permits to carry and all this type of stuff, licenses to carry and all of that. And I want to make it really clear right here. Again, this might trigger more questions for like a part 2, 3, 4, how many ever. It doesn't matter. That's completely fine. I'm more than happy to keep having these discussions with you guys. Yeah. But I'm what you kind of consider a Second Amendment absolutist, which, I go by the definition of what's in the Constitution. And I read shall not be infringed pretty plain and clear. And yeah, I don't think there should actually be any regulation or restrictions on our firearms whatsoever. And as in DC versus Heller, that was arms of offense and or weapons of offense and armor of defense, so that includes body armor, which again I've had sitting behind me too earlier. So with all of that being said, one thing that's not mentioned in the Constitution, though, is transportation. You have the right to travel, but you don't have the means, or you don't have, like, put it this way, driving a car is a privilege, not a right, at the end of the day. And so you can lose that if you misuse it, right? Same thing could be with your firearms rights, which I also argue, like for felons, prisoners, that are recently released or anything like that. Yes, I do believe that felons should get all of their rights back, including firearms rights. And then, of course, the biggest retort to that is, well, you think rapists and murderers who get out from prison should get their gun rights back. And it's like, well, no, I believe that if somebody is considered a threat to society, they shouldn't be in society. They should be in prison. Right. So, that's where my response to that is. And so, no, again, our justice system is more of a legal system, I think, but I'm getting a little off topic here. But at the end of it all, should carrying a firearm come with the same requirements as driving a car? My simple answer is no. We can dive into more of that here after I get y'all's answers, what you think about that.
I actually testified. Ted Cruz asked me to testify before the Senate to testify against safe storage laws. And I call it the 91 seconds that I will never get back. The 91 seconds that I will never get back, because I was burglarized 5 years before this shooting in Sutherland Springs happened. And I lost a 45 ACP that I kept in my closet that I used for my carry gun. And for the next 2 months, I feared coming home to my own house and the burglar being back in my house, and this time with my gun. So I made it every time I got home, I would unload all my guns and I would put them away and lock them in the safe, because the burglar just got that one gun because it was out of the safe. And then when the shooting started, and I knew that I was going to be speaking to the Senate, United States Senate. So I timed myself 4 different times, and the best time that I got, opening my safe, grabbing a magazine and a rifle, popping open a box of ammo, and shoving 8 rounds in it, it took me 91 seconds. And understand that 91 seconds while I was doing that, I was hearing the shots. I was hearing pop, 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 pop. The 91 seconds that I used to grab a gun out, to load it before I could run into action, how many people died in that 91 seconds? So no, I believe that you should know your own situation and be able to, as a responsible human being, know how to keep people's hands off of your guns that aren't authorized to use them. But you need to know your own situation. And if you don't have young children in the house that are untrained, that don't know how to handle the guns and stuff, then you should probably, if you have those children there, then you should probably take precautions that those children cannot get a hold of your guns. However, if you are a older person like myself that had no children living in my house at the time, I should be able to make the determination to know what's safe in my home. And I don't need the government coming in and telling me how I need to store something and how that would impact a situation like Sutherland Springs. I truly regret not having a gun, an AR-15, as a matter of fact, in my closet, loaded, ready to go.
Yeah.
Rob, how about you, man? When it comes to firearms, having the same requirements as driving a car?
Yeah, I'm with you, Clint. The short answer is no. I think that, understanding when you're reading laws and rules and stuff, understanding the difference between should and shall. If you're a gun owner, somebody uses a gun, should you, go through extra training? Yeah, you absolutely should. Is it a shall? No, because the fundamental right is your fundamental right to keep and bear arms. And so I think that's the difference. I lean towards what you were talking about. It's hard to have a blanket answer on, if somebody goes and strays away and commits a crime, and especially a heinous crime, and they serve their time and they get out, should they have their rights restored? Yes and no. Yeah, I mean, I don't want some mass murderer to get off on some loophole, and I don't want a gun to fall into the wrong hands. I think we can all say that, right?
Yeah.
I think there's monsters out there that exist, but yeah, just having it be a blanket answer.
Yeah. No, and so like I said, when it comes to a vehicle, it's not a constitutional right.
Right.
Or at least not a right protected by the Constitution, to drive a car. With that being said, a lot of people will also say, having the same requirements as driving a car. They'll talk about a registration, things like that. No, I don't even think we should actually register our cars either, but that's a different topic.
Right.
So, it's like, yeah. And what we've seen throughout the course of history is, a registration typically leads to confiscation, which typically leads to mass murder. And, and if a lot of people are saying, well, you're just out of touch, or this isn't going to happen in today's society, we've had this discussion, and it's like, guys, this is happening though. It's happening in the world. You're just not hearing about it, things like that. And of course, I can be fact checked on that. That's fine. I'll probably put up stuff in the description that's going to kind of like give a little bit more information as to what I am talking about. But it has been, almost 3 hours here that we've been talking, and I think probably give our viewers or listeners a break now. But I think that was a pretty good one to kind of end it on, because I think it is, pretty, actually, let's do one more, because this one, we can kind of talk a little bit more about red flag laws and things like that. So, but this driving a car thing, I just want people to understand that, like, carrying a firearm, yes, it comes with different responsibilities that we should all be accountable for. But it's up to you at the end of the day to make those decisions, to seek that training and to become proficient with this tool. Just like a lot of us, I've taken driving classes. Yeah, I wanted to become a better driver, you know what I mean? A defensive driver, things like that. I did rally racing and stuff. I've done road racing before. I wanted to be a good driver, and it's something I do every day almost. So yeah, why not take more courses in driving and defensive driving and stuff like that? So that way you can avoid the maniac that wants to brake check you or ride your ass or something. And a lot of it's mindset though. Like I said, check your ego at the door, especially if you're carrying a gun. Check your ego at the door. I had a friend of mine recently get into a shooting over a road rage incident. Thankfully he pulled his gun, shot one round over the hood of this car, and he saw that, he did it more as a warning shot, which I always advise against. But in this case, it worked out for him, and looks like things are okay, but I'm not going to go any more in detail because it's still an active case right now. But that's something, we can talk about a little bit offline. But even still, he did everything he could to try to avoid the situation, but was keep being confronted, and then finally being actually assaulted from the vehicle. So, which is just wild to me. And so that happened, but thankfully, at the end of the day, other than taking a beer bottle to the head, he's okay. But that just goes to show, like, man, it can happen at any point in time. But this next question, kind of going about, like, requirements as far as like driving a car and owning a gun, who identifies individuals before they act violently? That's something that's, it's an odd question to ask, honestly. But the follow-up to that is, and what powers should authorities have to intervene? So who identifies individuals before they act violently, and what powers should authorities have to intervene? And which kind of comes down to another question that was asked: would you support any kind of temporary removal laws like red flag laws, or do you see that as overreach? Quite a bit there in those 2.5 kind of questions. But I'll let you guys kind of take it there. I mean, Rob, with your experience in law enforcement, things like that, what power should authorities have to intervene? Who, if at any point in time in your career, have you seen somebody that, came out and said, like, hey, so-and-so has been writing weird things, they're acting strange, I'm worried about them, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, in some of the classes that we teach, especially when I'm talking to civilians and, maybe firearms aren't even involved in these trainings. But, we always say, it sounds so cliche, but it's true. It's like, if you see something, say something, right? It's so important. And how many times have we heard of these, these tragedies that happen, and then you get the neighbor or the teacher says, you know what? Yep, Johnny did this. And you know what? If it was anybody that was going to do this, I always knew it was going to be Johnny. Well, why didn't you say something? Right? Maybe law enforcement could have gotten the information and gotten ahead of it and done their job. Right? We've seen it time and time again, man. The information was there and people didn't act. I think cops in general have an obligation, just like school district officials have an obligation. If they see something that they think is dangerous, they should bring it up to the authorities, and they should do what they can to mitigate it and try to get ahead of it. When it comes to red flag laws, it's a hard pass for me. I'm not going to ever support red flag laws. There are too many people that are involved in it that maybe just be anti-gun just to be anti-gun. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people's rights can, come into play here, where it's like, no, like, we're dealing with emotion. We're dealing maybe not with so much fact, and to take somebody's right away and make them work to prove that the other person was wrong, I think is just, it's not the way to go about it. I think it's very, very dangerous when you talk about people's constitutional rights.
Yeah, that's all of it is concerning. Because I kind of want to go back to what you were saying just a moment ago. So let's say, somebody contacted law enforcement and, they did say like, hey, so-and-so is acting a certain way that is concerning or something like that. In my mind, a simple, like what, we used to do again at the police department I worked at, again, smaller, we weren't like overwhelmed with work at the end of the day. So they could actually write out and do a welfare check, right? They just make contact. That's it. Just make contact. Like, hey, we just received some reports, some, concerning information. Just want to make sure you're okay. That little bit right there, I feel could at least let the individual know that, oh,
we're watching,
right?
Yeah.
Because like you, I am also hugely against red flag laws. I do believe that they are an absolute overreach and an infringement on our constitutional and civil rights. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I don't want it to be possible for anybody to be able to say, well, he's a big gun guy and he's talked crazy about the government, so you might want to go check out, what he's got and make sure that, he's safe or whatever. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm just exercising my First and Second Amendment right here. I
actually have a story real quick. I'm sorry, Steven.
Yeah.
I had a family member that called the chief of police one time, and I won't say who the family member was. I will just say that she's a very close family member, and she was dealing with some mental health issues and maybe some substance abuse issues. And she was out of her mind. And she called my boss and told my chief that I was a domestic terrorist and that I shot her house up with rubber bullets. And then I had no business being in law enforcement, and that he hired basically a terrorist. And luckily the chief knew me very well and knew this person and knew their background. But I'm like, that could have been an instance where, oh my gosh, this family member's calling in about one of my officers. And how could have that affected me, with these red flag laws? I mean, that could have been horrible for me, right? To have to prove, no, I didn't. Like, it just gives me undue process, right? To get back my rights. And so,
I mean, we've seen so many
dangerous.
so many times people be lied on about, sexual assault, things like that, making up crazy things. I honestly don't know for why in a lot of different situations. Maybe you just have an issue with somebody and you want to see them burn. Maybe, you're just jealous even, whatever. I don't want to leave up my rights to any one individual, at all. Like, that's not fun for me. And I don't want government intervening whatsoever. Stephen, what were you going to say?
I got a little microcosm of how red flag laws work, because anybody can say, oh, he owns guns and I think he's a danger to himself or other people.
Yeah.
So I had been invited to speak at Daniel Defense, actually. And they they paid me to come up and speak to their, they did a safety shutdown for their entire factory and let me speak. And what an honor was that and everything. I thought that was real cool. And they flew me to Savannah, Georgia. And at the time, that was really cool. And at the time, Recoil Magazine was going to do a interview with me and put it in their magazine. And so I did this with Daniel Defense, and man, I had a great time and everything. And they got me back to the airport, when they were flying me home, and I'm walking through the airport. And it's so cool. The Savannah airport has electronic billboards with Daniel Defense on the billboards.
Oh, yeah.
Walking through the airport, I thought, oh, how cool is that? And I went into a little store there and I saw Recoil Magazine's there. And I'm going to do an interview with Recoil Magazine. They're going to do an article. And so I picked up a Recoil Magazine so I'd have reading material while I was waiting and while I was flying and whatever. And I'm sitting there at the gate.
Yeah.
And I'm reading and I've got a Daniel Defense t-shirt or polo shirt on that Daniel Defense gave me. And so I'm wearing Daniel Defense polo shirt. And I'm reading a Recoil Magazine. I'm sitting there at the gate.
Yeah.
And the flight pulls in and they start offloading the flight. And all at once, all these airport police come over and stand at the gate. And we're lined up now to board the flight. And this lady looked at me and said, wow, somebody must have done something on that flight and they're waiting to arrest them. And we're joking about that. And all of a sudden they came over to me.
Yeah.
And they said, we need to see you over it. And they pointed to another gate that was empty. We need to see you over at that gate.
Hmm.
All right, me? Yes, we need to see you over at that gate. Why? What? Just calm down. Just come over to the other gate. The pilot wants to talk to you. All right. Okay. And I walked over to the other gate and they start boarding. And all the airport police are right there at that gate. And I'm surrounded by police officers. And the pilot looks at me and said, someone on this flight said he heard you talking and said you were going to kill a bunch of people. I said, me? Seriously, me? He said, that's what they said, that you were going to kill a bunch. And the only thing I could figure is they saw the Daniel Defense t-shirt, the polo. They saw the Recoil Magazine and decided they were going to swat me as such.
Yeah.
Whatever. And I had my hat box with me and I opened up the hat box and I pulled out the challenge coin from the sheriff. I said, the sheriff gave me that last night when I spoke. I said, you need to consider who you're talking to. If something like that were to happen, I'm the guy you want on that flight. I said, how dare you think that I was going to kill a bunch of people? And they said, well, we're sorry. We just have to check these things out.
Yeah.
I said, I went through security. I had nothing on me.
Right.
And the pilot says, well, I wasn't going to fly out of here unless I knew for sure.
Yeah.
And
so all it takes is one, there's one voice.
Someone there was a liberal and saw the Daniel Defense shirt, saw the Recoil Magazine, and decided that they didn't want me on that flight. And as I'm walking away, the chief of the airport police said, I told that pilot there's nothing I could do about it. And the one thing that I enjoyed when I boarded last after everybody else had boarded.
So they see you, whoever it was,
down the aisle to take my seat. And whoever did that to me had to watch me walk down the aisle and sit in my seat.
Yeah, exactly. They got to see that they didn't win. They inconvenienced you, but they didn't win.
It inconvenienced me, but the thing is, and that's how red flag laws work, is because anyone that disagrees with you owning a few guns behind you, Clint, say, I think he's dangerous and he owns guns. And now all of a sudden they're taking all your guns, and so many times they charge you storage for them while you try to prove yourself innocent.
Yeah, and that's the biggest takeaway there is what happened to innocent until proven guilty. You know, in this current state right now, we see it so many times. You're guilty until proven innocent, and that's not the United States. That's not the Constitution. That's not at all what is supposed to happen. And that's, again, I think why the three of us here are so against red flag laws. And I'm talking to anybody who thinks they might be a good idea. Just think, I mean, the overuse, again, I mean, anybody that's been lied on at any point in time, like, just think about that. Just, it could be the smallest thing, the smallest inconvenience to you could be, well, in some situations, life or death. You got people with guns showing up to your door. You don't know what the hell's going on. You haven't done anything, right? I mean, it could get dangerous really quick, and it has been. What was the woman's name that was, shot and killed in some sort of no-knock raid or something due to a red flag or something like that?
Brian Malinowski.
What's that?
Brian Malinowski.
It happened to him. Yeah.
And Brian comes to they taped over his doorbell camera and then kicked open his door 28 seconds after they knocked on his door. He probably looked at his doorbell camera and saw that it was taped over and thought that somebody was breaking into his house. And he came out with a pistol and they shot him in the head and killed him in front of his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I don't think, what he did was unjustified. I mean, if somebody's banging on the door or something like that, trying to kick in my door and I can't see through it because they've covered up either my Ring camera or something like that. Yeah, dude, I'm going to think there's a threat on the other side of the door, not law enforcement.
Right.
Like, man, if you guys got a problem, call me. I know you have my number.
Right.
I've contacted my local police department here just to kind of let them know who I am, because I'm I get afraid of being swatted and stuff like that, and I'm just like, hey, look, I've got, yeah, dude, I'm an enthusiast. I am a, Second Amendment advocate. I work for Gun Owners of America. I've got my own channel. And I respect what you guys do. So yeah, man, if you guys have any issues, just give me a call. Here's my wife's number. Here's my number. That's all there is to it.
I'm your friend.
Yeah. At the end of the day, that's it.
I think all of Wilson County knows that my gun's never their problem.
Yeah. Which is good. With that though, I think now, it has been 3 hours, and I think we'll give our viewers and audience a break, even though I know they can hit pause at any point in time. But still, it's a long listen. I think we covered a lot of good topics, and we still got a lot more to cover also. But I think we hit some pretty big ones today. And I think going forward, I'd love to get you guys on a live stream and answer some of these questions live as they're coming in. I think that would be a lot of fun. Yeah, but in addition to that, chat, comment section, light it up. Let's talk about who we can get on here that would actually be willing to come and have a conversation. We can get people up here yelling all day long, but I mean, just like how we've been talking this entire time, other than maybe getting a little emotional thinking back on some of our past experiences and stuff, but getting somebody with an opposing view to have an open dialogue and a conversation and try to at least find some common ground. Maybe it might be a little difficult with me. I know that because I've already said I'm a 2A absolutist. You're going to have a hard time changing my mind, but I still want to understand your perspective. I still want to hear where you're coming from, and I'm still going to offer you the same type of respect that you're going to offer me at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway here is we don't want to exclude anybody as well. If you're very left leaning, but you still like your guns and stuff, all right, I totally get that. But let's have a little bit of a dialogue as to what you're left leaning about. We can have the entire dialogue about the two-party system and how I think that's an absolute joke. But, because I hate having to put titles on anything, like, oh, you're Republican or Democrat, or you're liberal or you're conservative. Actually, I'm just me, I'm independent. I just don't want to be messed with. I'm just freedom loving. And, I have my principles and my morals, sure. But a lot of it is, look, we live in a country that was founded on freedom, religious freedom, things like that. And that's what I think we should stay true to. But anyway, final takeaway for you guys and whatever message you guys want to leave anybody with.
Yeah,
Rob, I'll let you go first. Yeah.
Again, Clint, thank you for letting us come on your platform, man, and have this discussion. I will also challenge our listeners, just to be, open, with people. Let's be able to sit down and actually have these difficult conversations sometimes with people, and let's be adults about it. We don't have to be confrontational, all the time. And I think it's an important topic, and people have, at the end of the day, I mean, I raised my right hand and swore to, uphold the Constitution just like you did, Clint. And, I hold that very, very important and close to my heart. And even though I'm not in law enforcement anymore, I still think it's our duty. And so people are able to think how they think. People are people. You don't have to agree with their mindset, but at the end of the day, let's continue protecting our Constitution. Let's continue protecting, what's important. And, I'm also open, man. You guys can contact me. I know my contact information will be there, but, I'm real active on, Instagram at Rob James Young. I would love for you guys to follow me. I try to get back to everybody who messages me. And if you need to get a hold of me personally, you got Clint's info, you can get a hold of me through either of these guys. We talk often. So again, I appreciate you.
For sure. Of course, Rob. And Stephen?
Well, I just want everybody to know, if you see me walking out, I don't normally open carry, but if I do, and please don't fear me, because I may be your solution at some point. Not all gun owners are bad guys. In fact, very, very few of us are. And I told the lady one time, she said she didn't agree with what I did. And I said, I hope you're never involved in a mass shooting. But if you are, find someone like myself to stand behind, because I will do everything I can to save your life. And she said, I would never risk my life for you. And I said, I don't want you to. Just don't stand in my way.
Yeah.
And I don't care about your political view. I don't care about your race, your gender, or whatever you think your gender is. I don't care about any of that. Gun owners will risk their lives for innocence. And please understand that. We're not a problem. We're not a threat. And I guess that's wrap for me.
That's that. Well, perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for joining and hopping in and having this discussion. I hope it gets out there, and I hope it opens up the dialogue for a lot of people. God bless you guys. Thank you so much. And of course, everybody watching at home, comment away about who else you would like to see us invite here to have this conversation, and about maybe somebody that could be, that shares similar views, and of course those that oppose, because we're willing to have that conversation, and we'll put it out there. So thanks again. Appreciate you guys. Everybody watching at home. Till next time. Y'all have a good one.